Good evening, everybody. Good evening, wherever you are in the world. Good day if you're in America. This is the Midweek Wire. I'm Patrick Henningsen, your host. Thank you for joining us. Very important broadcast today. We're going to be doing a very deep dive, so buckle up. We're going to bring Freddie Ponton onto the show to talk about a very controversial subject. Before we get there, I want to thank everybody on our live streams on X, Facebook Live, Rumble, BitChute, YouTube, and also on the audio streams. Thank you for joining us. And of course, at 21stcenturywire.com, we're running a live stream there as well. Again, if you miss any of the live broadcasts, you can catch us at our website, 21stcenturywire.com. You can see the link at the bottom of the ticker tape on the screen here. Now, this past week, actually the past 2 weeks, we started covering the JFK file drop, and we've done some great discussions and deep dives, including interviews with Ryan Dawson on both the JFK assassination as well as the Robert F. Kennedy assassination, RFK assassination. Last two programs we've done with Ryan Dawson. Excellent. You can get those at 21stcenturywire.com. And so where does that bring us in this story? What we found from these documents is a clear connection with the JFK assassination and Israel. The activities of the Israeli intelligence working with the mob and the CIA through an agent known as James Jesus Angleton, who was really the exclusive Israeli liaison, if you will, with the CIA, working on behalf and almost exclusively for the state of Israel. And he is very much implicated in the JFK assassination. According to a lot of these documents, there's a clear crossover there. Why was John F. Kennedy, during his administration, why was he so concerned with Israel? Well, there's good reason for that. We're going to discuss it. It has to do with Israel's nuclear program. And just to set the table on this, I want to bring onto the stage right now our guest, Freddie Ponton. He is a journalist. He is a contributor at 21stcenturywire.com. And Freddie, well, first of all, welcome to this special edition of the Midweek Wire. Great to have you.
Well, it's great to be on the show, Patrick. Always good to be here. And I love the subject, the topics of today, so I'm looking forward to that.
Well, we've got a lot of ground to cover. This is going to be very information intense. So if you're watching and this is a subject that's interesting for you, you're going to get pretty much everything that we're going to be able to throw at you during this program. Now, Freddie, this is how it started. The JFK file release by Donald Trump. And a lot of people are speculating as to, the motivations behind the assassination of JFK. And what we found was clear evidence of this problem that was developing between the United States government and the state of Israel. It had to do with a number of things, but mainly centered around Israel was putting together a clandestine nuclear weapons program. The Kennedy administration knew about it. They're trying to bring Israel into the non-proliferation frameworks internationally, test ban treaties and so forth. Israel didn't want to have any of that. They wanted to basically keep the program under wraps, secret in a clandestine way. And the rest is history. And what we do is we'll set the table right now with a clip from this independent documentary film, and we'll put up this on screen because we did feature this at 21st Century Wire. It's called NUMEC. This is a film by Ryan Dawson. He's an independent journalist, independent filmmaker, and researcher. It's How Israel Stole the Atomic Bomb and Killed JFK. Excellent independent documentary film. The research, the facts, the receipts in here are solid, okay? NUMEC, the nuclear plant in Pennsylvania in the United States where Israel stole weapons-grade uranium, smuggled it out, to basically give the foundations for their illegal, illicit nuclear weapons program against the wishes of the United States government, running a spy operation on U.S. soil. All of this stuff was exposed. In fact, just to put this on screen right now, this is up at 21stcenturywire.com. For any doubters, this is from the National Security Archive. Okay, we've republished this at 21st Century Wire. Concerned about nuclear weapons, JFK pushed for inspection of Israeli nuclear facilities. This is from the United States National Security Archive. Okay, this is not a conspiracy theory. Atomic Energy Commission inspectors gave Dimona a clean bill of health twice after deliberately truncating tours. So basically, they weren't allowing them to inspect the facilities, and there seemed to be some coercion and bribery going on here, quite clearly. And the U.S. intelligence community was very suspicious of the inspections that were done there. And this was a huge problem. So much so, Ben Gurion, pictured in here, resigned soon after this controversy took place. And then soon after that, just you can see him there on the on the right hand side, your right hand side of the screen. John F. Kennedy was assassinated in cold blood not long after. And a lot of the evidence does point to, including documents in the JFK files, the fact that Israel had a clear motive, means, and opportunity to kill the U.S. president. And this is a fascinating read here. It's got all the details of this issue laid out, again, in the U.S. National Security Archive. So it's amazing piece of information. And right there, Kennedy, Dimona, and the nuclear proliferation problem. Okay, it's all there, folks. So, and we can go further. Fred, you've also posted an excellent report, which we'll also bring onto the screen as well. And it has to do with the UMEC scandal. And we'll actually bring that up on screen as well, because I think people need to see that as well. But this is also up at 21stcenturywire.com. We just posted this just the other day as well. So both of these reports are in the featured section of our website right now. So if you go to our website, 21stcenturywire.com, you'll see both of these reports. Here's the other one. We'll bring this up on stage. National Security Archive report, the NUMEC affair and Israel's nuclear weapons program. Very well documented here, okay? Very well documented. And we'll bring this up here. And we're going to play as well. We'll come back to it, but we'll come back. There's a great video on here by an independent journalist, Jaleesa Dugro, which we will play as well in a moment. But, I mean, Fred, the details in here. NUMEC did highly enriched uranium from the U.S. aid Israel's nuclear weapons program. Quite clearly, it did. And just to set the table as well, we're going to play a little clip from Ryan Dawson's independent documentary film, NUMEC. We'll play this right now.
Following the failed 1956 attack on Egypt, David Ben-Gurion sent his protege, Shimon Peres, the future Prime Minister of Israel, to Paris following the war, with the mission of acquiring nuclear technology from the French, which the Israelis themselves could not develop. They made a secret deal in 1957, where the French would provide Israel with nuclear technology and associated training. Covertly, hiding in the Negev desert, the French built a plutonium-based nuclear plant in Dimona for the Israelis. It was supposed to be kept a secret, but American U-2 spy planes would spot the unaccounted-for rig in the middle of the empty desert. Israel insisted it was nothing but an innocent textile plant. The United States demanded inspections of the site.
Yeah, didn't exactly go the way the United States wanted it to go, Freddie, did it? And that brings us to the story which we're going to be focusing on today. And this is really what we're talking about here. Let's just call it, Fred, the nuclear quid pro quo. The Israeli and the French government, their joint nuclear weapons program, secret nuclear weapons program. This is the most extraordinary story, Freddie. This is a huge scandal that most people do not know about, but has massive implications on the global security architecture, the UN Security Council, the fact that France sits on the UN Security Council, and the fact that Israel, to this day, Freddie, with undeclared arsenal of nuclear warheads, some say up over 300 nuclear warheads Israel has, and with no oversight. No, they're not a party to any arms treaty or nuclear non-proliferation, no IAEA inspections, none of that. And France is right here at the heart of this scandal. Freddie, this is an absolutely extraordinary story. I just want to give you the floor just to get us going on this. And we have a lot of evidence and a story that I think needs to be told here, which I hope we'll be able to do during this program. But go ahead, Freddie.
Well, thank you, Patrick. I'm glad you show Ryan Dawson a documentary, even if it's a snippet of it. It's very important. It's extremely well made. And for researchers like myself, of course, we love the details. And I think for people that will look and watch this documentary, they will appreciate the amount of work that went into it. So I really commend the work of Ryan Dawson on that. But yes, it's absolutely right. Everything that he actually outlined in this documentary is pretty much what I'm getting as well. It's the story of a network, really. What really the main picture that comes out of this documentary is this vast network that is operating in support of Israel, whether it's in support of the Zionist cause or whether it is in support of the Greater Israel Project, which goes hand in hand with what we are currently experimenting and seeing on television every day. So it's very worrying, of course, and as you rightly stated, it's unbelievable that the United Nations Security Council has not done more effort to investigate and force Israel to open the gates, basically, because it is not a secret any longer. And as I will demonstrate today, we can see that the same network or same kind of network basically at play in the United States to facilitate all sorts of programs which are pretty much clandestine in nature. The same happened in France, and it's well established. Now, I didn't know there was so much information actually available in France, and when you go through it very quickly, you realize that from 1949 onwards, this is when the Israeli nuclear program was actually launched, although the conversation took place over a period of 5-6 years, ongoing primarily with the United States, but the United States doesn't want to have to do anything with it. First of all, the prospect of China and France joining the exclusive club of the nuclear power is already a problem. Say they certainly don't want to add on top of that the nuclearizations of the Middle East, if you will, and they're going to try to stop that at all costs. But like any government, there are back doors. There are these back channels where conversations are taking place, and we can see that very quickly from 1954 onwards. With Ben Gurion coming to Paris after it's been refused by the United States and said, look, I think there is something to be done here. And he's offering a mutual assistance in developing the bomb. On one side, if you will, he understands that France is very advanced as far as research and development in the nuclear field. And on the other side, he also knows, and he's going to prey on that, if you will, that the French are still feeling guilty over events that have taken place at the end of the Second World War with regards to the transfer of Jews into concentration camps, some kind of a helping hand, if you will, with the Nazi at the time, and France feel extremely guilty at the time. So the socialists that are in powers within the 50s clearly, are very keen, are very open to the idea of helping Israel. And Israel is a young state. I mean, 1949 is literally a year after the Nakba, the catastrophe about Palestinians being moved and removed from their lands, and a lot of violence that accompany, obviously, these operations. And what I found really unbelievable, Patrick, is that at this particular time, you move into a new regions. Most of the Jewish people that move into Israel are not from Israel, they're from Europe, from Eastern Europe, from different places. And they come here, and the first thing they have in mind, it's literally to launch a nuclear program. And that's very interesting in understanding the mindset, if you will, because you can think that way unless you're fearful, fearful for your future, for the stability of the country, or you're simply already have in mind that you need to acquire this nuclear deterrence capability and send a very, very strong signal to your neighbors that there is a new sheriff in town. And I think that's really what I'm looking at the beginning, is that how that early Israel was already thinking about that. So very important, because the two countries, France and Israel, shared a common enemy at the time, and it's going to be growing all over the years, if you will. And this common enemy is in Egypt. It's Gamal Abdel Nasser, because he's on one hand very involved with the French in Algeria, if you will, and he's supporting the National Liberation Front of Algeria. And that's a major problem for the French. And on the other side, he's also supporting the Palestinian cause. So, if you will, there is two elements there that create, if you will, a common enemy. And that is under on this bridge, if you will, that this cooperation is going to be built, because everyone's saying basically an interest in cooperating, and it pretty much aligned. France is very much supportive of Israel, of the Israeli project, if you will, and all they need is to be sold. And that's exactly what Ben Gurion is going to do. He's going to prepare a strategy. He's going to work behind the scenes to set up and to activate his network in France, to take him to the highest level within our governments, to start basically the process of procurement, first of all, with buying tanks, buying planes, and then as soon as that trust is in place, then it'll move on to the discussions with regards to the nuclear program, which people have come to know as the Dimona program.
So just we got to tell us what we're looking at here. I mean, this is the aerial shot of the Dimona plant in the Negev desert in Israel, and so it's our understanding France built this plant basically. Israel did not have the ability to do this on their own. Tell us how this story comes about, and then we'll move along here. And there's some persons of interest you want to introduce along this storyline, which we'll do. But Dimona, how did this happen?
Well, Dimona is a replicate of a research and development and nuclear power plant in France. Okay, that is called Saclay, and we'll put a picture up in a moment. But what's really interesting is that there is a lot of things that happens when you want to launch a nuclear power program. First of all, you need to decide whether it's going to be a civilian nuclear power program just to get electricity, and or you're going to want in the long term to develop a military a nuclear program, and that's a complete different game. So what you're seeing here, it's obviously an advanced version whereby you have a nuclear facility with a normal reactors, and then comes on top of that a plutonium separation plant that's going to basically recondition the fuel, the waste fuel. Normally the waste fuel is sent back to France for chemical, if you will, treatments. Okay, that's what it is. If you have just a normal civilian nuclear plant, you don't need that fuel waste, if you will, from the reactor. But here in this case, with the plutoniums and the separation plant, it allows you to develop a nuclear weapon to manufacture nuclear warheads, and that's exactly really interesting, because the way this deal is set up, Patrick, is that France has a lot of advanced technology in terms of developing the nuclear civilian program. They have it. They've been very successful in France, and it's growing up at a very fast pace. But on the other side, France is lacking of knowledge in the military sector. And France is very, very keen on acquiring the nuclear weapon, if you will, the nuclear bomb. But for that, they need the help. And the only people that can provide that help is the United States. And the United States at the time is not prepared to give that kind of knowledge, that expertise to France. So Israel come up with the idea of proposing to France to have a trade, if you will. And the deal is very simple. You build for us Dimona, which we see on that pictures. And on the other side, we basically going to provide you with all the blueprints to build a military nuclear weapon. And the France, this is going to be the key argument that's going to really flip the deal in favor of Israel. So a lot of things going to happen in this context of, because they do not arrive at that stage, from the get-go. It's going to go through a process, and we're going to describe that process. But all in all, this is what it is. It is about a country that wants to acquire both civilian nuclear program and a military nuclear program. And if you look, for example, because the debate at the moment is all about, whether the United States and Israel are going to do or launch an attack on Iran. It's all this talk about this. We saw, obviously, the attack of Israel on Damascus killed some official of Iran. Iran retaliates and send a very strong message. And what is the message? Out of all these shenanigans and out of all this war effort is one message to retrieve from all that. And that is that Iran has the capabilities, basically, to send a hypersonic message and to land it at 30 kilometers away from that particular base, that Dimona base. That's all they needed to do. How they did it, all that, the technicality, the swarm of drones, and how they basically triggered all the air defense systems, which was perfect for recording where the defense systems are, how they operate. That's another matter. But all in all, the takeaway is the Dimona nuclear station is vulnerable, and that is a game changer, because you cannot look at this and say, oh, it's not really important. It's not. It is extremely important, because the way this is constructed, this is not just on the surface. There is many levels below, and that was revealed by Vanunu. That story of Vanunu, will cover it a little bit, because I think Ryan already covered it in his documentary. But absolutely unbelievable story of these guys from Morocco. Actually, it was from Morocco, Vanunu, and ended up moving his family to Israel in the 50s. And very quickly, he's going to obviously give his 2 years in the military service. And then from that, going to be trained as a corps of engineers, as a nuclear scientist, and then move and become a manager at the plant. And then 8 years later, he's an activist. He supports Palestine. He's absolutely appalled by what Israel is doing in Lebanon. He's going to actually become laïc. He's going to become Christians, and he's going to basically be fired. And what happened after that is simply revealing the plans, and all the story about how he did it, how he came to the UK. And all that is fantastic. I mean, it's a James Bond, really. I'm amazed that there's probably a movie that's been made about that, because what a crazy story with the Mossad and sending a girl and extracting him from Rome. The whole story is crazy. But we get the takeaway. We understand what it meant. And what it meant is that I saw what I saw. The Sunday Times believed me. And if you don't believe that story, well, believe the Israeli, because they put me 18 years in jail.
Yeah.
And most of it was in isolation.
Yeah, we'll get to the Vanunu story, because I know that might come a little bit later. But so save that, hold that thought on
Sure.
Mordecai Vanunu. But just to reiterate there, so the construction of this facility was more or less done initially in secret. That's the main point. It was done in secret with the French. So this was
it's a complete clandestine.
So just
clandestine.
Yeah.
It is clandestine in nature, Patrick, obviously, because at this particular moment in time, US has a lot of influence around the world, that still has today. But it is quite clear that sphere of influence in the Middle East, especially in the Gulf region, where the US has a lot of interest. France has interest as well with the Arabs. They don't want the Arabs to know what's going on. They certainly don't want the Arabs to know that they are helping Israel acquiring nuclear capabilities. That's something it has to stay below the radar, and they're going to do it really well, but it's not going to last long. But they're going to do it very well in terms of keeping it for themselves and developing. But when you, as I say, move thousands of scientists in Israel, and they're going to be staying there for more than 18 months. Some people talk even about 2,500 different reports in France. When you read it, it's absolutely amazing, the level of activity that is taking place. And then, of course, hundreds of scientists from Israel are going to come to France to be trained in France. So before that happened, of course, they needed a plan. And Ben-Gurion is going to send his little protege, Shimon Peres. And that's where really the whole story starts, really, when Ben-Gurion in 1952 appointed Shimon Peres as the deputy director general for the Ministry of Defense. And very quickly after that, the following year, he's going to be promoted as Director General. So this is someone that's going to be given at the age of 29 years old a lot of power.
Very young.
Very young. He's very young. Yeah. He spotted the leadership. He spotted someone that comes out of a kibbutz. That's his story. Yeah. We have documentaries in France where he's interviewed, and he explained his life in the kibbutz and so on, and how he got to this very high level position in the Ministry of Defense. But his first mission, really, that is that is entrusted with by Ben Gurion is to go to France, to go to Paris, and he has organized basically a point of contact. Bear in mind that Shimon Peres doesn't speak a word of French and doesn't speak a word of English at the time. Right? So he's a bit on the back foot, if you will. And Ben Gurion told him, do not worry, everything is organized. Just go there. You're going to meet that guy. He's a Jewish guy. He's going to help you. And he's going to get you where you need to do and where you need to go. And at the time, what's happening is that Shimon Peres is basically entrusted to buy primarily tanks, not talking about even nuclear power program in 1952. We're talking about buying AMX, which was the future Leclerc tank in France. He's going to buy about 250 of them, so it's not little. And then he's going to buy, below the radar again, 9 Dassault jet fighters, the Mirage. And that's what his mission is. And then, of course, to start to be introduced and to acquaint himself with a man called Georges Elghozy. And when he arrived in France, Georges Elghozy, who is basically the economic advisor to Pierre Mendès France, the France prime minister at the time, right? And he's Elghozy is a very rich single Jewish guy. He's extremely well off. He's a single guy. He lives with his mother, and he's really basically as the heirs of the prime minister in France. So that man was going to be the conduit, if you will, that is going to be used by Shimon Peres to start to plant the seeds about, strengthening this relationship between Israel and France, but also primarily starting to plant the seed about a nuclear program. How do we do?
Elghozy was one of the chief economic advisors, wasn't he, for the?
That is correct. Yeah, he's economic advisor to Pierre Mendès France, the prime minister of France at the time. Pierre Mendès France only going to be a prime minister for 8 months. He's not going to stay long, and that's very interesting because we're going to see how the network and the Israeli supporters in France within the Socialist Party are going to really take on this offer, and they're going to really drag it and take it to completion, because it's really difficult to get that approved in France. It takes a lot of people to approve it, and for them to have achieved that in such a small amount of time, they could have not done that with help, and that's where the network.
That's an important detail. Just quickly, Fred, you said that the socialist government at the time in France, and then the birth of Israel had a very heavy socialist veneer to it, with the sort of kibbutz image of Israel working the land. It was very much appealed to Eastern European communists, but also socialist French as well. So that's a powerful motivator, wasn't it, to cooperate? That's one of the things that glued the relationship at that early moment, right?
Yes, absolutely. All the right conditions were in place, if you will. You have the sense of guilt. You have the socialists in power. You have, obviously, the conduit with high-level contacts within the government that can really introduce and open the door. This is about opening the doors. They're not coming empty-handed. They're coming with a wonderful deal. First, they're going to spend money with the French. They're going to buy the tanks, buy the Leclerc. But then afterward, this is going to be about, engaging in a major clandestine operation, and they need to build that trust, and that's exactly what they're going to be doing. So in that case, we have Shimon Peres in 1954, at the end of 1954, coming back to France. So all he does for about 8 years is back and forth between Israel and France. And he's going to meet the minister, Marie-Pierre Cunning, as a military guy's defense ministers of France at the time in 1954. And he's going to obviously start shipping and having a large amount of weapons shipped to Israel. So he's going to really arm, and France is going to arm Israel really to the teeth, and it's going to be going on for years. But at the same time, what we see in 1954 in the documents is we see that already Shimon Peres has had access to a gentleman called Guy Mollet, and Guy Mollet is fighting to become the new minister, the new prime minister of France. He wants to be basically the person that is going to be really in power and be able to help Israel. And that's going to be very interesting, because as soon as 1955 comes up, we're going to see how much Guy Mollet is going to work behind the scene with Shimon Peres and to really launch the nuclear program cooperation between Israel and France.
Okay, so we'll move on here and to I think we have a video. Well, there's Abdel Nasser. But before that, I think we want to play this initial video clip here, and just to tell us what's going on.
Yes, that's. This is Guy Mollet here, right there. This is Guy Mollet. Guy Mollet is visiting basically Ben Gurion, and he's going to really, as I say, being one of the best defender for the Dimona nuclear reactor case, if you will, because they're still pitching the French government, and they need to have the approval of Guy Mollet. And they're gonna really, we don't know how much, how close they got to him, but it is quite clear that he was a big supporter of Israel. And at that time, I think it was quite clear that Shimon Peres had a great talent. He was a great speaker, although he couldn't speak much in English and French, but his presence, and he has the ability really to convince people. And I don't know, perhaps there was money, or we don't know. That we'll never know. This is going to be remaining obviously classified, and these are personal relationship, again, through the Jewish network in France. So we don't know. But what also we understand as well with Guy Mollet is that Guy Mollet is going to play an important role as well at the early part during the planning of the Suez crisis. So he's going to be very much involved, and he's going to be, of course, a big supporter of Israel again. So that's already setting up the relationships, working together. And of course, France has a very strong strategy with regards to the Suez Canal with Britain as well. So they're all going to conspire about taking out Nasser. And obviously things will go as the history has told us.
Yeah, that's some archival footage here, which you provided us. There's Ben Gurion there. So there's that. And then so back to this man, Gamal Abdel Nasser, who was the leader of Egypt, Arab nationalist, big concern for a lot of people, big concern for the U.S., big concern for the state of Israel and their allies. Obviously, that makes them a concern for France as well, considering the alliances, Freddie, at the time. So just tell us how this fits into the story.
Well, the main problem, if you will, for France, as far as France is concerned, is really the problem with the FLN, the National Liberation Front of Algeria. And that becomes a major problem, a lot of instability, a lot of fighting, a lot of resistance going on. And in there, we'll see later on that Israel is also in Algeria and supporting France as well, supporting the brigade, the OAS, and so on. So we have that history, and it's very complex, of course, because after the changeover with Charles de Gaulle, everything is going to change progressively, despite the promise that Charles de Gaulle did and made to the French people. So it's very complex, and I really don't want to get too much into that. But what's really we can understand here is that this is the foundations of the cooperation. As I said, the Suez Canal is going to really solidify this relationship. And what we're going to see with that is that the French are actually going to break the tripartite agreements that was put in place to keep the status quo between UK, the US, and France with regards to the regions. And the idea was obviously to stop flooding the regions with weapons, but France is going to ignore that, and they're going to break that agreement very quickly. Same for Britain as well. So that's going to be obviously creating all the tensions that we know. And then from that, this is the time where now the seeds have been planted. A lot of procurement has taken place with tanks and planes, and then now this is the time to enter the phase one, if you will, of this nuclear cooperation. And that phase one is very important because it introduced a key really person in this nuclear deal, and this guy's name is Abel Thomas. Abel Thomas was the chief of staff of the Ministry of Defense between 1956 and 1957. And he was working with Maurice Bourges-Manoury, the defense minister at the time. And that man is going to be extremely important for Shimon Peres, because he is the one that is going to, pretty much get the deal done. He only needs one more approval and the deal is done. And that's going to be very interesting because there's a lot of documents in France we're able to look at. And it's very, very unbelievable how very quickly, in a very small span of time, how Shimon Peres and Ben Gurion were able to literally be inside the Ministry of Defense, be inside the Prime Minister's office. I mean, if you really walked in the Minister of Defense, Shimon Peres had his own office there next to the Chief of Staff.
In France.
In France, he had his own office in our Ministry of Defense. Can you believe that?
And just to remind people, we're talking about Shimon Peres, the future prime minister, president of Israel. There's one photo, but he ended up being the leader. He's also one of the original, on the ground, Irgun Haganan fighters as well, labeled as listed as terrorists at the time. Later became the IDF, and so at a very young age, and this is what you're also putting there, at a very young age, these people who were baptized by fire through World War II, but also then through the bloody creation of the State of Israel into positions of power here. And so these are some of the key players with the formation of this clandestine nuclear weapons program that was done between Israel and France. This is the incredible thing, Freddie, because a lot of people know that Israel stole enriched uranium from the United States, and they know that they're procuring different things through spy rings with the help of various people at the time, plus arms trafficking that was going on. But very few people understand how tight the relationship was between the French and the Israelis at the time, because it wouldn't have happened without the French. And Freddie, it wouldn't have happened for France without Israel, and that's the big story here. And
it is the big story, because without France, Israel does not have a nuclear power program, and without Israel, France does not have a military a nuclear warhead. So they have so much interest in common to work together. It's literally the perfect storm if you look at it. The conditions are right. There's that guilt over the Jewish case in France. There is a common enemy. Everything happened. And then, as you say, over the time, trust is something you build. It's just not there straight away. But the entire black market of weapons, from Britain, but also from France. You have all the Irgun, as you said, is a terrorist organization, which was with Menachem Begin. Menachem Begin was the leader of the Irgun, and of course, Ben Gurion at the time was not really happy with him to some degrees, and he's going to attack. Actually, there's going to be a famous story about him attacking a boat with Irgun military being killed and personnel being killed, and eventually Menachem Begin and the Irgun will be swallowed up into the IDF, if you will. So they're all working for the same cause. I think they were just struggling a little bit in between various, terrorist group in Israel. Everybody wanted to get that leadership and being recognized as, as the strong. So major, as I say, fanatism to a certain degree, fanatism, ideology, and everybody's on the same page at that level, is that Israel is going to be the Hebrew state, and anyone that's going to interfere with that is going to be feeling it, basically. And they have a strong relationship with France. And France really, with planes, especially with planes, we saw that during the Suez Canal, when the war with Egypt in the Sinai Peninsula, where the planes are going to be really making and tipping the balance of power in the favor of Israel.
Yeah, ultimately. So, and tell us the next character that comes into the story here, Francis. Not to be confused with the famous actor, by the way.
Yeah,
Francis. It's different Francis Perrin, but this is a very key person, wasn't he?
He's more than the key person. Is that without him, you don't have a deal. So we saw earlier Abel Thomas, how important this guy is, because of his access and his closeness to Francis Perrin. And Francis Perrin is the director of the Atomic Energy Commission. Without him, there's no deal, period. If that guy is decide and say, look, I don't see anything in there for us. And what's going to really make the deal happen is the fact that Francis Perrin loved the idea of France obtaining, if you will, securing the nuclear deterrence capability. So from a defense point of view with Abel Thomas, they're really on the same page. And at that time, he's convinced, we don't know anything that happened behind the curtains, that you will never know. But what we know is that this is what really got the deal for the Israeli, is that the promise of getting the atomic bomb and making France part of this nuclear power club was basically absolutely something that France was not going to pass. And that's why they went along with it. But everything, as you said earlier, had to remain clandestine, not basically to upset the Arabs, which the French were having a good relationship with and developing, especially the energy sector, the oil and gas sectors, and so on.
Yeah, amazing. So that brings us to the Franco-Israeli nuclear gang. Here they are. These are the principals in this story. Just tell us about this meeting here of these rogues gallery of operatives here. Amazing.
Yeah, they're all pretty much there with Ben Gurion and so on, and of course Shimon Peres. It's just basically those that participated on behalf of Israel, basically to the completion. They know how the nuclear gang, the Israeli Franco nuclear gang. These are those that are making it happen. Very powerful people, and these people are heroes in Israel because they've really brought Israel to a level that is making Israel an extremely influential partner for the United States and France in the Middle East. That deterrence, that knowledge that now not only they have access to nuclear technology for civilian, for creating electricity, but also the knowledge that basically they've acquired and developed over the years, of course, that nuclear capabilities from a military point of view. It's just mind-blowing for small little states, 2.5 million inhabitants. How on earth these people need, and why would they need a nuclear a program, if you will? And as I say, Iran, 1950s, they went into this program. You remember with Dwight Eisenhower, they started this program under the Atoms for Peace. That's how Iran started their nuclear power project. The first thing Iran did is they actually signed the non-proliferation treaty and automatically allowed the IAEA to come and the inspectors to come to make sure that this was indeed a nuclear power for civilian purposes, for peaceful purposes.
Yeah, the first reactor it was given by the United States to the Iranians.
That is correct.
It's in the basement of the University of Tehran, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that is correct.
And so that was given to them by the U.S. So the U.S. Started the Iranian civilian nuclear program.
Yeah, absolutely. The U.S. administration under Dwight Eisenhower was very much in favor. I mean, the famous speech, about atoms for peace is really essential in the strategy in the U.S. is to say we have a great technology here. We have something that the U.S. wanted to become a major players in the nuclear industry, and that's something that they wanted to do, and promoting peace in the same way. So having this very transparent process where inspectors are allowed to come, it really create bonds, it create trust. Say, okay, these guys, they're open. So it's really about establishing the kind of people you're dealing with, the kind of country. Can it be trusted or can it not be trusted? And at the time, Iran was that. Well, of course, afterwards, after the revolution, everything changed. And especially what people do not mention is after the revolution in Iran, Iran was aware of this program. They were aware that Israel has acquired nuclear technology, and they were very much aware of the Dimona program. So it is quite clear that later down the line, they knew that they had to maintain and to keep their nuclear facilities. And this is at that time Iran moved towards developing and enriching uranium as well. There's no doubt they did it because they would not let Israel do that in front of them and them not doing anything. Where is the program now? I have no idea. Everybody's guessing at the moment, but it is quite clear that they're not going to be deterred, if you will, by a nuclear power just around the corner and them being left basically hanging out their drive. So it's really have what this cooperation between France and Israel, which is the point that I'm trying to make, is really have an impact. It was a long time ago, 70 years ago, and the decision that was made at this time having a major consequence in the debate of today, because this is going to play in the equations on how the deal is going to be handled by the United States, how it's going to be handled by Israel, and of course by the neighboring states. So it's very, very crucial to understand how one decision can change, the destiny of a complete region.
Yes, indeed. So that brings us to this is a book, and again, this is important as well. There's a lot of reference material that's not available so much in English, but which you have kind of introduced here. This is one of those key pieces of text, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. 1956, France did not have the, as I said, the acquired knowledge to create an atomic bomb, which is what Israel was interested in. And what we were able to gather in a lot of informations on how this was done, how the entire program was developed, if you will, who were the actors. This is not French government doing a nuclear program. These are companies, a network of companies that's going to be highly involved and set up companies in order to accommodate that. But because it's clandestine, they have to open front of the house. They have to open companies in different countries. And there's a whole process in that. And we only probably know half of it. But what's interesting is in this book, Affaire Atomique by Dominique Lawrence, is that she confirms really that at the time there was a secret approval by the American service about this nuclear deal. And that really changes all the story that I've heard so far, because what we are told is America didn't want to have anything to do with that, and they didn't want Israel to have a nuclear program. But the backdoors conversation were happening, and you had René Coty at the time, the French president, speaking with Dwight Eisenhower and entertaining these conversations, obviously behind the curtain, behind closed door, and discussing basically how they're going to handle that, because it was becoming big, and it was becoming so big that the United States had to get involved. So there was a chaperoning a little bit going on here. And it is quite clear to me from the book and from other books that I've had the opportunity to review. It's quite clear that the America were not in the dark, as we were told. There were a lot of people in the dark, but not all of them.
Yeah. And so it's also what was going on historically at the time, the Suez Crisis in 1956, that basically changed the realignment of the power distribution in the Middle East, because that's kind of regarded by many people, Freddie, as the end of the British Empire. Well and truly, it's when Britain basically was pushed off of their pedestal in the Middle East, that they had been in the top position for so long, and the United States kind of moved in. So America so before it was the British and the French, before the Suez Crisis, and because of the outcome of the Suez Crisis and the fact that the United States basically temporarily anyway took Egypt's position there to stabilize the situation. Eisenhower, as you said, that was basically, the Israelis took that also as a point of urgency to work with the French, didn't they? They really fast-tracked this nuclear effort. A lot of it had to do with the geopolitics in the region, didn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, securing the Suez Canal was very important for the United States and also for French and Britain, but it's not really just that. It's the way they did it. The way they did it made it really, and created scars, in the region, really. Because if you look at the end of the Suez Canal crisis, you get 40 ships at the bottom of the canal. You can't use the canal, and the canal was blocked for quite a long period of time. So what we are seeing here, and if you look at today, if you just kind of transpose what happened there at the time, and if you look at now today's in a region where the United States has probably only 3% of its global trade going through the Canal of Suez, it's not a region that is that important for the US. It is not. It's not that much, but this is about partners. This is about, helping partners, securing the deals, helping Israel, helping those that are considered as allying countries or partners of the United States. So this is not about the United States itself. This is about securing their geopolitical and the sphere of influence of their partner in the region. So that's, as I say, it's a very complex, and we could talk about it for hours. But what's really important here is Israel make the best out of all the situation that occurs, and they really did the best, and that's really very important, because the way this nuclear deal, as I say, was articulated, if you will, we still have to answer the main questions: is how on earth Israel got the blueprints, got all the documents, all the details, all the information that is necessary to build a nuclear warhead. They're not American. They don't have access to American classified, probably the highest classified thematic in the United States. So how does it get to that? And the question to that is very simple, because energy scientists, nuclear scientists in France have done some research on that, and they say that the only person at that time that was capable of really putting on the table the blueprints and how to build from scratch, how to enrich the uraniums, all that kind of things. There was a lot of information, and the most suited person for that would have been Robert Oppenheimer. Robert Oppenheimer, the father of the atomic bomb, was working in Los Alamos at the time, was the head of the laboratory. And until 1944, he had a security clearance, which was revoked during the McCarthy era. But he was really kind of the man that could provide that. So from the expert in France in nuclear technology, they say that if that information came to France and from Israel, Israel got it from Oppenheimer.
So there's a picture of Dr. Robert Oppenheimer there. He's, I believe, he's on our left-hand side. And then Paula Ben-Gurion, I think that's the wife of David Ben-Gurion, and then yes, the 5'3" wonder himself, David Ben-Gurion, co-founder of the State of Israel and whatnot, prime minister at the time. So Oppenheimer, and if you watch the film that was out recently, Freddie, it got rave reviews. Of course, I saw this film. It was very interesting. They made a big point in this film to focus on the Jewishness of Robert Oppenheimer and how he was traumatized by the Holocaust and what that did to his people, and he felt he was duty bound to help his people. There was a subtext in that film, but they didn't go any further with it. But this is where the story went, right? It went straight to Israel. That's not covered in the film, you see.
No, they don't cover it in the movie, and of course the reason why is because it's scheduled. If you look, when you lose your security clearance, especially at the highest level, we're above zebra clearance. This is way much higher, and or Q clearance. So what we're talking about here is the man that obviously has a particular affection for Israel, or at least the Israeli project. And as you said, his history, his own personal experience through the Second World War will make him definitely a very strong supporter and ally of Ben-Gurion. And that is the reason you can see that you don't bring your wife on these kind of things unless there is a personal relationship. This is a personal pictures, and this is in 1958. What's interesting about this timing is that Oppenheimer has no longer his security clearance. He's only going to get it back in 1963. So there is a period here which coincides directly with the nuclear program in between France and Israel. All right. And that's really interesting because 1954, he's out. He cannot have that security clearance. So what does he do for 8 years? What does he do? Well, he's going to cooperate. And there is a parallel story to that nobody knows about, but it links back because we have French scientists, American scientists, but marrying a French person here in Aix-en-Provence, which work at Los Alamos. It's the guys called Malina. So it's a long story, but he married Christine Maxwell, one of the Robert Maxwell daughter. And there's a long story about that because there is definitely an intelligence conduit here from Israel. And it's not surprising that we find that guy working for Los Alamos and being a rocket scientist there and developing rockets and so on. So it is a lot of things that grips into that. And again, this is part of the network. And again, we have the Maxwell reappearing out of the blue. That's a story that's never been told. But Malina is someone, people that are interested in that, with Christine Maxwell. You want to look into that because you'll find him. He was born in America, in Texas, I think. So very interesting story. But to go back to Oppenheimer, I have absolutely no doubt in my mind, looking at various documents, various people that knows what they're talking about in France, especially in the nuclear industry. I think there's no doubt that Oppenheimer was the conduit for Israel to obtain all that documentation, and they traded it with the French.
Yeah, no, clearly. So that's kind of a triangle of sorts, but clandestine, a clandestine triangle. They're unbelievable how this all turned out in the end here. And then the story does move on a little bit, and that brings us to the next character here, Arnon Milchan. Very interesting person, Freddie. Tell us about this gentleman.
Well, he's an Israeli billionaire, he's a businessman, he's a film producer, but more importantly, he's a former spy. And, from his own admission, we know that later in life, he's going to not confess, but just say, oh, yes, I work with Israeli and I've helped them for a very long time. Now, what's interesting about Arnon Milchan is what's recruited in the early 60s by Israeli secretive, very secret economic spy unit, and he was known as the Lakam, and he was part of the Lakam. And that's how, with his network in Hollywood and high level, obviously, network in the United States, he was able to help within in his own right, if you will. He was able to acquire information, vital informations about the United States positions on the Israeli nuclear program and activities, what was going on, and more importantly, later on, we'll see that he will be the man that's going to provide the triggers, the triggers for the particular atomic bomb. It needs very specific equipment, and that piece of equipment and how to build it was acquired by Milchan. So again, that's what Ryan Dawson shows in his movie. This is not something you have to have the complete piece of the puzzle and understanding how this web, of course, of pro-Zionist, of pro-Jewish states, if you will, are prepared to do it on a voluntary basis or maybe on a compensated basis. We don't really know. Or we know in France, we call them the Sayanim. The Sayanims are simply basically agents of Israel on a voluntary basis, provide help and support within various cross-sections of the government as well as in the corporate world. So there's a complete web of people that are prepared to work for Israel, to support the Israeli cause, whether it's Zionism, whether it's ideology, or simply because they want to return eventually at some stage to Israel. And that's the web that Ryan Dawson is describing, and Milchan is an important piece of that.
And there he is later in life, as after JFK, the film there. This is with Benjamin Netanyahu, his very close friend and colleague, associate. So clearly an operative of Israeli interests at an extremely high level with massive influence in the United States as well. Yeah. So a bit of a super spy, if you will, a bit of a Robert Maxwell sort of level, isn't he?
Yes, completely, and he owns it as well, which is really what is incredible. When you're capable of coming forward and say, "Yeah, I took stuff from you. I did it." There is a level of comfort, if you will, that clearly should really worry the American people. Mm-hmm. These are foreign agents. That's why JFK was so adamant about having the AIPAC and the Zionist Organization Association, the ZOA, to become basically unregistered as a foreign agent, because they are foreign agents and they influence in politics, and with the money and with the networks they have in place for many, many years, they have taken almost control of America's foreign policies to some degrees. And that seems to be what is electing a president is all about. And I think there was some testimonies I was reading not so long ago about JFK meeting some very important within the Jewish community. And they told them, look, we support you, but you have to give us control over your foreign policy. We're never going to trust you with anything unless we have that control and the guarantee. So security guarantee, foreign policy guarantee is how you get elected, and you'll get all the money in the world that you want. That's the deal you are prepared to sign. And what we are saying today with the Trump's policy and the knots at the National Security Council and all this nonsense about attacking the Houthis when there's nothing in there for the United States. I mean, the Goldberg story is just an example of that, but there's so many other examples of whatever this foreign policy is acting is certainly not acting in the best interest of the United States and the Americans. It's really Israeli first. Yeah. It's an Israeli first policy, and they just have to send you a piece of propaganda so you can swallow the pill. I think that's what Goldberg's story is all about.
Yeah, and here's just another brief clip from Ryan Dawson's film NUMEC, and that'll bring us as well segue into the next character in this story. But yeah, Arnon Milchan, absolutely key player here on so many different levels. Some might argue, including the cover-up of the JFK story. You know, executive producer of the film JFK omits any knowledge or any mention of the state of Israel in the JFK assassination. So some might say that this was a gatekeeper, a very wealthy gatekeeper that came in to basically somehow, in a way control the film. This is up for debate, obviously. So we'll hopefully we'll find out more about that in the future. But at the moment, we don't want to jump the gun just yet. So here's a clip from NUMEC that will bring us to the next juncture of this incredible story, Freddie.
Despite the well-established and well-known precedents of Zionist smuggling and stealing boatloads of armaments from the United States, and the indisputable evidence of Israeli intelligence agents regularly meeting with Zalman Shapiro in Pennsylvania, a dedicated and committed Zionist with ties to the Israeli government, as well as hundreds of kilos of highly enriched uranium being reported missing from NUMEC and unaccounted for, the highest out of every commercial plant in the United States, and Israel having a covert nuclear program, which they lie about at every turn, undermine inspections of, and the very suspicious samples at Dimona of highly enriched uranium that was measured with scientific certainty, which the Israelis by themselves could not develop. The notion that highly enriched uranium was diverted from the United States to Israel was challenged.
Hardly challengeable story. The evidence is all there, Freddie, and that brings us to a very interesting character here. This gentleman.
Zalman Shapiro.
Yes.
Yes, he's look, this guy it's unbelievable. First of all, just to make a comment about what you just said, there is no doubt that the United States provided enriched uranium to Israel. And the reason why is a very simple reason. It's simply because France in the 1950s and beyond, they simply did not have enough uranium. Right? We didn't have the uranium from Africa at that time. It's only later on, after the 60s, that France is going to go and get this uranium, which is a far higher grade, by the way. So the uranium that France was using was the uranium that we have in France. And it's a low grade, and the process, and if you're going to do testing and so on, you're going to need a quite large quantity as well. So the quantity we're talking about here are absolutely spectacular at the time. So it's only one place that could have provided that, and it would have been definitely the US and probably the UK as well a little bit.
Yeah. So back to
Zalman Shapiro. Yes, Shapiro. Well, I'm not going to re-talk about what Ryan has covered. What I would just say is that the French were in touch, of course, with NUMEC. I mean, this program is full of cooperation, not only between France and Israel, but also with France and the United States. And NUMEC is based in Apollo in Pennsylvania, and they have this major nuclear facilities to enrich uranium. And what they need, obviously, France, is to create a joint venture, right, to have access to all this technology, but also the enriched uranium, because that is going to be a complete logistic that's going to go through Argentina, Uruguay, Sahara, Algeria, and other places as well to end up in Israel. What we've noticed is that there is a venture that was set up by NUMEC co-founder Zalman Shapiro. And he basically went on a venture with a company called Société d'Application de la Physique, which is SIIP, and it's basically an agent of a Swiss company called Société d'Électronique Nucléaire, SEN. I've done the research, I have the documents, it's all well documented. And what we know now is that the venture was called Numic Instruments and Controls Corporation, Numinco. And Numinco is going to be a very important partner in that particular venture because it's going to help to do a lot of things for the French, amongst which acquiring not only technologies, but also enriched uranium for Israel. So, of course, all that is classified and a lot of things was done behind, all the records were taken out. But what's very interesting is some of the books that we saw earlier, we have a good understanding of the companies, the corporation that were necessary to act as a front or simply to provide the technology, the know-how, the expertise to build this Dimona nuclear power plant, and of course the associated plutonium separation plants for the military side of it. So all that requires technology, and that technology, most of it was available in France, but the know-how and the expertise was available in the United States. So for the US to say they were not aware of it, energy, nuclear scientists in France would just laugh at you. Say, how?
And the other key here, Freddie, is that this was an array of private companies that were used to launder, to smuggle, to hide, to obfuscate. And then afterwards, these companies were just dissolved. So in a way, the paper trail, so if this was done through governments, they would come under a lot more oversight. There's a lot more risk because of the public eye and the scandals that could be associated with that. But they did this in a clandestine way through a series of companies and shell companies. That's a real, and then they dissolved the whole thing once they got the bomb. Is that more or less what happened, Fred?
Yes, it's basically, don't forget the length of the project. We're talking about a project that has different stages, and we're going to talk about it in a moment. But as I said, there's so many different angles you can use to verify the story. You don't just have to have one document that tells you that's what happened. What you can do is to look at different angles. You can look, we talked about Vanunu, that's one angle, because that's basically an Israeli telling you I was there, so you don't have to believe us, just believe their own people. And he came with the good. And then the other angle is to look at the testing facilities, right? And looking at how the test was conducted. And that's also very revealing, in terms of understanding how the test, who conducted the test, and who is the client. Right? How many countries in the 1950s and early 60s had the ability to conduct large-scale nuclear tests? How many? That's it. You get your answer. So right now, at that time, as I said, all you need to understand is the provenance and the amount of uranium that is used, that needs to be enriched in order to conduct this test. And when you understand that the amount, of course, that we had available in France was not enough to justify all these tests, surely France is testing not only for French nuclear weapons, France is testing for at least two other countries, namely Israel and apartheid South Africa.
Aha. And this is one of the keys of the whole story, is that Israel could not do its testing by itself, didn't have the ability, but France did. France had colonial territories that were more or less out of the way. We're talking about the Sahara Desert in Africa, and we're talking about the Southeast Asian and South Pacific atoll regions, archipelagos in the South Pacific. And that's, so are you saying, Freddie, that's where Israel's weapons were tested by France? Is that what you're saying?
100%, and we can prove it as well, because this is not even classified, but the list of complete nuclear tests conducted by the French government from 1960, at least the data that I have that I'll show you now.
And bring that up on the screen. Yeah,
for a period of 8-9 years, you're going to see something very interesting. And what's interesting is, as I say, it's the progression, right? There's going to be two areas, as you just said. The first area is going to be in the Sahara, right? So they're going to use two major sites. One of the sites here that is known in the Sahara for nuclear testing tunnels is Regan Hamoudia, right? And you can see the date. The first start of the nuclear test is on the 13th of February 1960. All right, started a bit earlier, but we'll accommodate ourselves with that. Regan Amuda. These are basically tests that are conducted in the air. So it's mid-air, 30, 40 meters, and they're going to use maybe 0.6 kilotons, 69 kilotons. It's a very small bomb. This is not something for the French government. They're quite sure of it. But this is not really at this stage very interesting, because they're going to also start to conduct tests in underground. So they're going to use dig tunnels under the sand, and then they're going to start to blow up things there in the Sahara Desert. And that's going to be very interesting, because really when the nuclear scientists, experts look at this data, the place they tell you to look into is 1966. And that's a very, very important moment, because you can clearly see that by August 1966, you have basically tests that are conducted on the 11th of August, on the 24th of August, and the 4th of September. Well, September and October. Yep. So literally just over a week, they conduct 3 tests. Okay, 3 tests. One's called Betelgeuse, the other one's called Rigel, the other one's called Sirius. Well, experts are saying that France did not have the capacity to develop and to produce a testing and uranium for testing for 3 bombs at that same time in a period of a week. It'll take a month just to analyze basically the material, to be able to go back to the lab, all the conditions that needs to be in place, basically to collect, of course, the evidence, and to be able to formulate some kind of outcome to see whether your weapons is actually providing the effect that is intended. And we're still talking about small amounts here, but already that France could not do it. And what we know that Betelgeuse was for France, Rigel was for Israel, and we know that Sirius was for South African apartheid South Africa. So this is going to be basically a pattern that's going to be repeated for a long time, especially for the aerial, these tests that are occurring mid-air. Some of them are low altitude, 50, 60 meters, but they tend to go, when they get bigger, with larger amounts. When you talk about hundreds and hundreds of kilotons all the way up to megatons, then they're going to go further up in the atmosphere, 600, 900 meters, and they're going to use balloons, and they're going to blow these uranium bombs, and to really, and a complete logistic around that with plane, missiles. It's unbelievable what it takes actually to conduct a nuclear test safely, or so-called safely, because it was not that safe. We'll go that in a moment. So Sahara was a very important moment. And of course, further down the line, if you go in the document, you will see that they're going to be moving to a different region. And they're going to move to different regions. And the areas where the French conduct their test is in French Polynesia. There's 2 major islands, but there's other couple of islands that they've used as well. But mainly Mururoa, very important place for the French, where they conducted all the tests there, but it's in the French Polynesia. And that's very interesting there, because the way they did it, and the pictures, the movies that were actually, the films that we were able to watch from it are very impressive. There's no way Israel had access to that. Absolutely zero. Right? So these nuclear power programs involve 2 things. It's involved the ability to test, the ability to enrich uranium in a period of time, and, of course, in a regular fashion, so that you can go back to the testing areas and keep on improving, keep on increasing the kilotons. And if you look here, I've outlined in the documents, you will see that you arrive at a moment where they're using 2,600 kilotons of uranium, enriched uranium. We're talking about 2.6 megaton. Just to give you an idea, Nagasaki was 21 kiloton, Hiroshima was 13 kiloton. And these guys are dealing with thousands, 24.6 megaton, 2,600 kilotons. It's huge. And this kind of blast midair, you'll blow that above a city like Istanbul or Ankara, it'll disappear in 20 seconds. It'll be vaporized.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this was serious nuclear ambitions here, and we'll come back to that, Freddie, because I know this. We're going to circle back to that in a minute because it's so important, the technical side. So I wanted to jump to that, but we have a video clip here of with JFK, I believe JFK and Charles de Gaulle. If I've got this correct, and just tell us, describe to us what's going on here.
Oh yes, that's well, we in 1961, you know, so de Gaulle is elected in 1958 as the new president of France. Really, the end of 1958. He actually entered his office in January 1959. And what's really interesting is that John Fitzgerald Kennedy, JFK, became president in 1961. So, and he's going to basically come to Paris to meet with Charles de Gaulle, and they pretty much have the same concern about this program because they both inherited of the situation. So when Charles de Gaulle come to office, the first thing is really going after is basically the standardization of this nuclear program because it's clandestine. There's no monitoring. Nobody has been able to send any inspectors. And at that moment in time, he's going to put a lot of pressure on the Israeli to basically sign the NPT, allow the inspectors to come in. And he's going to be quite pushy about it, very pushy indeed. And JFK is exactly exercising the same pressure on his side. So both are very much aligned. And during this visit, a lot of the talk, obviously, will address the nuclear problem with Israel. This will not televised, of course, but we know that from inside knowledge and expertise and journalists, eventually we know that the Dimona was a part of the conversations that JFK and Charles de Gaulle had in 1961. Funny enough, at that moment in time, if you look at the date, we know that I think JFK is assassinated on November the 22nd, 1963. But Charles de Gaulle is going to be falling victim of many assassination attempts. And that's going to be very interesting because I think it's just a month and a half or 3 months after the visit. No, not 3 months, a month and a half after JFK visit, Charles de Gaulle is going to be basically having and experiencing his first assassination attempt. They're basically going to put an IED. He's going through a village there, and they're going to put a bomb on the road to explode his car. Nobody's going to get hurt because they somehow the fuse were humid and it didn't really provide the explosion that they had planned. But if he had gone through, I think Charles de Gaulle will have died on that day. So he was very, very lucky. What's very interesting in this story, Patrick, is that we have basically the reports. People got arrested, and eventually some people are sentenced. But what's interesting is the person that's going to be arrested for that, the leader, the person, the brain behind the outfit, is a leader from the OAS, the secret army organizations which operate in Algeria. Right, against the resistance movement known as the FLN. But what is never been told, and not really told at all, is that the Mossad works with OAS. And I've actually a document, you can see it, I put it there. It was a Courrier d'Algérie. They actually reported on it, and they say, what are we talking about? The Mossad has been working with the OAS for a very long time. So it is not a stretch of the truth, or not really going too far of making an assumption that the OAS and the people behind multiple, and we're talking about only one here, there's two major ones, but it's been many attempts on the life of Charles de Gaulle. And the OAS leader was actually shot. He was sentenced to death. And
so like far right type group, which Israel likes working with those types. Obviously, any extremists, just like the U.S. government, the Israelis work with extremists, and so that's a very interesting. I've not seen anybody make this connection before, Fred. and it raises a lot of red flags. So there are a couple of assassination attempts on the life of Charles de Gaulle. This is just one of them here. It's the headline, the Citroën, the car here, this diplomatic, famous black Citroën car that saved the president's life. Coincidentally, the exact same car, I don't know if it's the same one, but the Iranian Supreme Leader's official car is exactly that. Slightly later model, same car. Must be a very dependable diplomatic vehicle, Freddie.
It's very comfortable. It's a DS. We call it a DS. And the DS are just absolutely amazingly comfortable. I mean, this is just at the time. I mean, of course, what you're looking at.
There he is. There he is riding in it. Charles de Gaulle, President de Gaulle.
Yeah. He was very lucky. I mean, he literally. I mean, if these guys knew what they were doing, but clearly we can see that DOS was behind it. I mean, the guys were sentenced and they killed him. They shot him dead. But what's interesting in that sense is that everybody blamed this kind of extremist group, operating in Algeria, and there's of course a huge polemic about Charles de Gaulle's stance on the Algerian case, about France operations in Algeria, and this is so political, it's so sensitive. It doesn't matter where you stand, nobody's going to agree with you, or very few going to agree with you. So it's an ongoing debate. It's never stopped in France. Some people think that Charles de Gaulle was a traitor. Many people saw Charles de Gaulle coming to power in France as a coup, because don't forget, he was already a president in the 1940s after the Second World War. So he came back. A lot of people accused him of being a monarch and bringing back and ruling France as a monarch because of the status and so on. So a lot of discussions, and a lot of them are valid, more or less. But it's a debate. When you enter in that, you're losing focus. But as far as I'm concerned, this is past and there's nothing we can do about it. But what I can look at is that, is there any associations with Israel and these OAS terrorist organizations, or whatever you want to call it? These are guys that were working in, and they were known to be violent and extremely motivated. So them working together, and literally a month and a half after JFK visited Charles de Gaulle and the attempt to kill him, as an investigator, I will put the dot together and I will ask some serious questions. Fortunately, time has passed, so I won't be able to do that.
Yeah. I mean, you have to make this connection, especially with what we know about the Israeli intelligence proximity to the assassination of JFK. That brings a whole new light onto the Charles de Gaulle story, Freddie, which I think is really important here.
Well, I'm just scratching the surface, as I say. We can go much deeper in that, and looking at Israeli operation in Algeria and so on. So we're not just looking at it as a small little example and nothing is there. There's a complete story to be told. We just simply don't have the luxury of the time to do that today, but there is a story that needs to be told. So this is what I say when we talk about Charles de Gaulle being almost taken out a month and a half after being JFK, knowing that the discussions around Dimona are very on everybody's lips, especially when this JFK administration is coming in. They want to put an end, they want to regulate it, they want to control it, and Israel is playing basically, I don't hear, I don't see, nothing to see here, goodbye. And the French government is embarrassed, of course, because they know the American knows of it, and Charles de Gaulle inherited of that.
So it could be, I mean, I regard, just my, basic understanding of French politics, I regard Charles de Gaulle as probably the father of, the modern sovereigntist figure of France. So if he was talking to the U.S. president about, so he comes into office in 59, looks at the file with Israel, and it's like, what is going on here? It must have been a shock to him.
He knew. People knew in France.
As an office in the French, it reminds me of the Macron government with McKinsey. You got all these like foreign actors who are like deeply embedded in the government. And you're wondering, are we actually in charge here? Who's actually running it? And so he comes into power, and he's like, I can kind of see his position would be, and like you said, his position on Algeria was also very controversial. He was very much France first, I would think. So he also had good relations with the Soviet Union and wanted good relations with everybody. quite
Well,
frankly.
a lot of things change. It is a very complex characters, and I think there's a lot of Atlantic pressures going on at the time
He
of
wasn't
the
a
war.
NATO. He wasn't a NATO advocate.
No, not at all. Not at all.
That's
What
the big
really,
thing.
yeah, what really created the problem is that from the very get-go, he was announcing himself as a sovereignist and respecting, of course, the right to independence, self-determinations. A bit like the discussions about Palestine at the moment, but it turned and he changed his speech and he said like, well, I'm going to surrender basically the French living there, basically that been living, that has really, people were born there, they were there for a long time, so a lot of French people were living there and were hoping that France would be there, would not let them down. And then at the end, basically, he retrieved the troops, and a lot of people got basically caught by the FLN because they only needed to settle some accounts, and that some people have never forgiven them. And that is the reason why the attempt assassination on de Gaulle is explained by, oh, this is the OAS taking revenge and that kind of thing. So I would say yes, it's plausible, it makes sense. People were convicted, so there's a lot of elements there. But is that the full story? And my view on that is no, there's more to the story.
Yeah. And so that brings us here. We have this also video clip here of the Marcoule nuclear power plant. I think this is what this footage is here, Freddie, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think it's Marcoule.
Yeah.
Marcoule.
Yeah, Marcoule. So this is bringing us into that region here. This is some footage as well. And so just explain the significance of this.
Well, Marcoule is an interesting. It's an interesting because it's, first of all, it's a nuclear power plant. It's a nuclear power plant, but it's also a research and development center. And when the project started in Marcoule, we realized, and the documents and many things attest to the fact that the Israeli led actually the startup of the Marcoule nuclear power plant in France. And that was in the 1960s. So a lot of Israeli physicists attended the first explosion. They were actually spotted in Regan in Algeria. And at that time, this is when we believe that the real military size of the nuclear coordination and cooperation with French is really starting in the 1960s. So the first enrichments, we believe that Marcoule nuclear plant was used, if you will, to enrich and to start basically preparing these testing facilities, and of course the uranium required for this testing is operation in the Sahara in Africa. So that's what Marcoule is important, because the Israelis are extremely involved in the setting up, the startup of the Marcoule nuclear power plant, its constructions, the development, everything. They want to be part of that. So that's why it's important. And then on the other side, as I said, is probably the key elements in this cooperation and the scandal behind it. It's the Dimona plutonium extraction plant. That is really where the problem lies, especially with the United States, and with even today with many countries around the world. They were given this opportunity to enrich the uranium and to use basically the waste fuel, and basically to build with the right technology and expertise their own weapon. And that's why they acquired more as I say, warheads than France actually possesses, and that's just unbelievable for such a small country.
So this is where for France, where the genesis of that program began, at this facility.
Yes, this is this facility. So again, you're going to find a lot of the technology, a lot of things that is going to be put in place there. The scientists, the Israeli scientists, are going to be trained there as well. So they're very much involved. They embedded themselves into the French nuclear program. There's no doubt about it. Right? So whether you look at this particular one, or if you look at the one that is going to be the replicate, if you will, the Dimona will be the replicate of, then this is really interesting, because you cannot do that unless you have such a kind of a pressure or leverage available. And the only leverage that I can see from the documents and from what we know, historical facts, is Francis Perrin wanted France to acquire this particular deterrence capability, nuclear deterrence capabilities. And for that particular reason, Israel is going to get a deal and is going to get its own nuclear power plant and its own, basically, plutonium separation plant. That's something France is obviously not really interested in discussing much, that's for sure, because this is a big problem, and it might become even a bigger problem, you know.
So Markula was the blueprint, if you will, for the Dimona nuclear power plant.
No, Saclay was the Saclay, the next one, Saclay Nuclear Research Center. I've got a video on it if you want to put it on. It's really the major R&D center. This is where a lot of scientists from Israel will come and be trained, you know, and that is already taking place in 1958. So Saclay is the main pole, if you will, in terms of R&D and development, and then Sarkul is more about developing, you know, a new facility, and Israel wants to be part of that, and they're going to be embedded in this. And then after that, over the years, you're going to have all these different R&D nuclear power plants that's going to mushrooms around the country in France.
Amazing. And so that's France becoming the biggest nuclear energy producer per capita in the world, the most amount of their power on the grid derived from nuclear power. 70%. By far.
We arrive, not now, but at the time, we arrive at a peak at 70% of our electrical power generated from atomic energy.
So it couldn't have done it without the Israelis?
Not the nuclear military program, for sure. Absolutely not, because you needed the blueprints, you needed the know-how, the expertise, and of course, a large quantity of enriched uranium. And France did not have enough to do that. It only comes later when we go to Africa and started to extract in Niger and other countries. We extract higher grade level of uranium. So there's only one country that could have provided this enriched uranium, and that's what the United States. And that's Shapiro that make that happen for Ben-Gurion.
And where did Israel get all that? They stole it. They stole it from the United States.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of what happened. I mean, let's just not kid ourselves here.
Yeah, that's it's there. I mean, the reports, you know, if you really go into details, you can clearly see even the amount. They're pretty close. They said 237, 35. But you see,
tell us what we've got here. Yeah. Freddie, what's this document that you've provided us here? This is Jack's statement, top secret, about France and Israel construction of air-cooled plutonium production reactor. Just explain this.
Declassified documents, simple as that. The US was looking into that as well, and they're going to be basically exchanging certain numbers of information. And this is the JAIC statement. The JAIC statement is a very important document because it confirms unequivocally, thanks to the declassification process, that France is and was assisting Israel in the constructions of an air-cooled plutonium production reactor. When you talk about plutonium protector reactor, you talk about definitely the possibility for producing basically bioproduct. And that's what this document exactly says. And it's plutonium separation plant, which we just discussed. And where they say it is in the Negev, it is near Beersheba. France is supplying the plans, the material, the equipment, the technical assistance, and also training Israeli personnel. So everything that I just told you that, it's in this document. It's there. So we don't need to supputate, make assumption. It's all there. We believe that the French are also supplying the reactor fuel element. And that's when you're talking about weaponizations of a nuclear facilities. This is when you turn basically your waste fuel into basically a warheads, and you cannot do that. Otherwise, you got to send it back for chemical disposal. You need to dispose of, chemically speaking. That means this product should have been sent back to France, right? And the natural uranium full graphite moderated reactor is believed to have a power of about 200 megawatt. That's massive. Okay, site preparation began in 1958. Okay, Guy Mollet, Perrin, Abel Thomas, all these people are part of that, and they're going to facilitate that. But again, the construction is 1959, so the document is telling you this is when we started to build the whole thing, right? And the reactor is expected to be in operation by mid-1961. What do we have in 1960? The first test in the Sahara Desert. 1961, they moved to Polynesia. This is where they're going to use the big guns. They're going to use the balloon. I have pictures of the balloons if you want to show them. And it's very interesting because that's help people understand the entire operation that is required in that. And at this stage, as I said, there's so much evidence of not only this cooperation, it's been acknowledged in France officially, it's been acknowledged by Israel alpha way, at least for the nuclear power plants for civilian purposes, but Israel will never confess, because the moment they say officially that they have the nuclear power plants and they are producing warheads and they have warheads, the Security Council has to act, and it's got to force Israel to open its gates, because this is illegal to have this kind of capabilities and operations going on without monitoring. That's why at the moment this has been used by the Trump administrations to go after Iran, and Israel is pushing that trigger, nuclear. That's why you need to go there. They have nuclear power. But what about Israel? What about nuclears? All right, just because they say no, it's not there. No, I just told you it's there. It's 100% there.
Yeah. Again, bringing it to the present, the issue is so relevant for today. And I just brought the list of nuclear tests here, and as you said, the dates, Freddie, are very important when you get into 1960 and 61, and this is coinciding with the completion of these projects, and you can see the whole program is coming together, and the clandestine nuclear weapons program is now beginning to come online, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And as I say, what's very important is to keep an eye on the weight, the volume. The volume speaks for itself. There's no way France could have produced that in the 60s, early 60s. That means this uranium is coming from somewhere. It's enriched somewhere. And more importantly, what we can clearly see here is, as you show in the document, is that here at the beginning it starts in Sahara, and you got, as I say, different kind of tests. You got the one that are done in the air, and the other one that is done below the ground. And there are other forms of nuclear tests. For example, in the French Polynesia, they're going to conduct tests in the Mura Lagoon, and these tests basically are about putting this high intensity charges of TNT, enriched, of course, and what it does, it basically creates tsunamis, and that is part of what people sometimes refer as the tactical nuclear. It's not tactical at all. All it does, it allows someone that possesses these nuclear weapons to basically detonate it off the coast of an areas to take out a coastal city. If you want to take, for example, San Diego or those places, where the Americans have this huge Navy and naval base, that's where they'll go, because it's coastal, and they could create a enemy that'll just take everything out. So that's really, again, this kind of program that are extremely dangerous. The capabilities are enormous, and it is what it is. But again, the thing to remember here is there is no nuclear military program without testing, period. Right. And so by looking at the testings, the quantities up to 2.6 megatons, there's no way in the 60s France could have that. So because we didn't have that quantity, someone that to provide the enriched uranium, this is what basically Ryan doesn't talk about, that logistics, the route through Uruguay, Argentina, Africa, and then eventually to Israel, but also to French Polynesia, because these are French test sites. And then from that onward, we can have a good idea on how the program is doing, how well it's doing, and we can clearly see that it keeps on increasing in intensity. Today, I would say that Israel has a very, very large, substantial, with different power level of nuclear warhead at their disposal. It's very serious.
Yeah. And again, this is a full record here of all these testing between these dates, I think from the early 60s to the 90s. It's all there, and we'll go to, and here's some footage, Freddie, here. This is the SEC Saclay nuclear R&D.
Yeah, that's Saclay. So that's Saclay in the 55, I think 56. I can't remember the date, but this is the model that we use, if you will, to build Dimona. Right? So that's Saclay in France, and I took the probably the only footage that exists of at that particular moment. When the Israelis are coming and being trained in these facilities.
Yeah, very important piece of history, and obviously we have, some of this archival footage available, putting it into context here within this discussion. So that's a really important piece of the puzzle here. We'll bring the documents back up again. We'll just bring this book. Freddie, explain the significance of. We'll go back to that. The significance of this book in French here, just if you will.
Hang on, because I'm a bit lost in my.
Les deux bombes, la guerre du Golfe.
Oh yeah. That's a book from Pierre Péan, right? It's a very good French journalist and a writer. And in 1991, he had this book called The Two Bombs, Les Deux Bombes. You can find all the original documents which identify the companies that are involved in the building of the Dimona nuclear plant. So it's quite interesting because we're always talking about France. France was in a cooperation with Israel, but who built it? And that book provides the answers. So we get the list of companies like Saint-Gobain, Quartz, Silice, SIECC, Compagnie des Produits Chimiques de Raffinerie, and so on and so on. And it's all documented. It's unbelievable because it provides you with the dates, the names of those. It also even provides you of the shareholders of the operation. So you have the name, the people that are brought in. Most of them are nuclear scientists or people that have been into the defense as well, and they brought it into under the umbrella of these companies, and they are given shares. So just, I don't know how much money was transferred, but we have all the documents. Someone more better than me in financials will very quickly understand the volume of what we're talking about here. And then, of course, as I mentioned earlier, Numinco in the United States in partnership with NUMEC as well. And this is just the surface. There's far more companies, obviously. We found some in Switzerland and other places. So I'm just, as I said, just don't want to overwhelm the audience with too much data, but it's available. Yeah, we have it. So that's what this book is important, and Pierre Péan is very, very solid journalist. So I have absolutely no problem in knowing that what is put in his book, the official documents, are absolutely real.
Yeah, and again, we'll bring that back up on.
We have them. Yeah,
Lead bombs. Bring that back up on screen, and then over to this document, Freddie here, which we have as well. Explain to us this. This is, I believe, these are what, French companies?
That's come from the book. These are the documents I was talking about. So these are documents that are very important because just let it unroll and people can see. But as you can see, these are just the name of the people that joined the company. If you slow down, I could have showed the title, because you can see this is Saint-Gobain. It's a major. You see Saint-Gobain, 1958. So the company here with create another company is called SIECC, Société Écran, which is a screen, a front of the house. They're telling you it's a screen company to protect her from basically anyone that would want to see it, because all records in France are public. But if you're going to work on a classified project like Dimona, you don't want any public to have access to this document. And that's exactly what this document is saying. On the 23rd of April, 1958, a retired man from the company of Saint-Gobain is actually founding a company, the SIECC. Okay, it is a screen company to protect any indiscreet, visitors or look. So nobody can look into it. Yeah, you can unroll now.
Yeah, we'll go through there. Yeah, and
Yeah, you're going to see one at the end of the document is absolutely mind-boggling. In my view, this is it's telling you exactly what happened.
Yeah. So again, secret shell companies, basically a corporate Russian doll sort of structure, companies within companies, all
Yeah.
keeping this out of the public view, totally
Yeah,
clandestine.
yeah, completely clandestine. But now this document is giving us the names, the people that were involved. Saint-Gobain was a major player, of course, in the constructions of Dimona. As I say, some people say up to 2,500 engineers and scientists were dispatched there for a period of 18 months, and they were building a 24 megawatt nuclear power plant. This is huge, man. This is for Israel. I mean, it's just massive. I want to see you see Société Quartz, stop here. You see companies Saint-Gobain, Société Quartz, and Silice, Société Anonyme. So you can see 5 million at a time in the 50s. This is a huge amount of money that is invested into that. Where this money come from, how it was moved in, who's coin on that. That's for financial forensic expert to do that. But at least we have the document, we have the name, we know it existed. And that's the whole point. It's too late, 70 years, it's too late. No one is going to go back and study that. But at least when people in the United States, when some alternative journalists are saying that, Israel is involved and it might be involved with the JFK. No, it's just not. Nobody will kill JFK just because of Dimona. Well, I'm telling you, these people are absolutely deluded, because this was a very, very, very high level project, highly classified in France. Still today, people hesitate to talk about it publicly. This is not a small thing, and the involvement in France is really, really quite substantial. All right, and they're not proud of it. I can tell you that. But it got us the nuclear bomb. Job done. The Israelis get their things. What they do, that it doesn't matter. It's out there in the Middle East. But we got our nuclear deterrence. The last document here is very important because it. Oh, sorry, you took it out.
Oh, we'll go back. Yeah, I'm sorry. We can go back. Yeah.
Okay.
1 second.
Yeah.
We'll go back if we can to the previous document here. We'll bring that back up. 1 second.
I think it's one of the last documents.
Yeah.
The last document of that
on this carousel, right? Yeah.
I don't see the top. Yeah. Oh, hang on. Sorry, guys. It's going too fast for me. OK. So, 2 décisions prises, président du Conseil Bourges-Nory, intervention publique, 3e partie, acte éducatif et culturel, décret d'arrêt circulaire. Non, c'est pas celui-là. It's the next one, I think. This is really a document that tell you, and it actually tells you, there you go, you got it here. La SIECC, which we saw was set up by someone brought in Saint-Gobain, was liquidated, okay? It was dissolved 10 years after the achievement of the Dimona factory. They call it the factory because the French government has always, for years, said that it was a textile factory. It was not a nuclear plant. People got it wrong, but it's just simply not true. And all the companies involved in that are based and are nuclear power related companies and technology. So the myth is no longer valid. We cannot call it any longer a myth. We French know, we have the document, many journalists, expert, probably better expert than I am in the nuclear field, know what happened. And we know that this was major, it was clandestine in nature. And today, after the last administration with the Kennedys, after both John and Robert were taken out, sadly so, there's not been any kind of hurdle for the Israeli administration, Lyndon Johnson and so on. I mean, all the Bush and no one has ever asked Israel to explain anything about anything. It's quite unbelievable. So for anyone to say, well, it's impossible that, Ben Gurion, who stepped down at the time, might have been ordering the assassination of JFK, think twice, because why is it that this whole nuclear story disappeared after both Kennedys were out of the pictures? It's just not normal. You get Charles de Gaulle, you get JFK, everybody wants to know what's going on. Suddenly, when those that were in power basically out, Charles de Gaulle's have to basically fear for his life. We're talking about, I don't know, about 30 assassination attempt against him. Some very small, some plots, things like that. Two major ones, at least, on record. And we know which was basically done by the US, and the US was partnering with the Mossad. It's documented. So that's my conclusion in terms of, not underestimating the importance of Dimona, not underestimating that a lot of people, even in the US administrations, didn't want their name to appear anywhere, because there was definitely ongoing conversation between France and the United States, when both countries were like, oh, we don't want Israel to have a nuclear weapons. It's not. This is deep states. That's what is referred to as deep states. And these people were very active between the 50s and for at least 8-9 years until it quieted down.
And in your opinion, do you think Oppenheimer was working independently with the Israelis, or with some knowledge, of the U.S. intelligence? I mean, was the U.S. administration aware of the fact that Israel was pursuing a nuclear weapon?
Well, you have to link again. This is not just this work in tandem. On one side, you have the Zionim, the people that are embedded. A lot of people say it doesn't exist. Well, of course it exists. I heard it from Jewish people myself telling me it exists. So don't tell me that it doesn't exist. These are people that are not just working for the Mossad. These are people that have ideology, that are supporting of Israel, that had personal grief, with the Holocaust and so on. These are not bad people. It's just people that say, you know what? I'm American. I live here. I make my living there. But if I can help Israel, if I'm in a position to do that, I'm going to do it. And I'm gladly going to do it. And that's the case of Oppenheimer. He's never hided his frustrations over the Holocaust and all the family stories and so on. And of course, his relationship with Ben Gurion, it's why Ben Gurion is sitting down with Oppenheimer. And then that's the one side of it. And then the second side of it is what is the network in place, the money. Money runs the world. So if you have enough money, which the Jewish people have, I mean, they're well known for it, they are capable of injecting huge amount of money. When people talk about the donor class in the United States, they always refer to as AIPAC. AIPAC was 374 employees, if I remember well, in Washington, D.C., in a very nice building. That's not what the donor class is. The donor class is hundreds of thousands of companies that are injecting money, to make sure that their candidate is going to be elected. And the policy number one, whether it's going to be the Democrats or the Republican, is that Israeli foreign policy needs to be aligned with Israel interests. It has always been about Israel first. Whether you like it or not, that is the truth.
Yeah. And then, obviously we showed you the list of test sites here. We'll bring that back up on stage. There's Oppenheimer again with Ben Gurion there in the late 50s. And then here's the test. And then that leads us to, we'll bring the map up as well of where the tests took place, so people can see the locations, which is here. So just explain to us how to navigate. Sorry, we'll bring that back up in a minute. Explain to us how to navigate this particular map, Freddie.
Well, these are just, as the map said, it's basically the principal sites and test sites where nuclear tests have been conducted since 1945. That's the map. So we have the United States, the Soviet Union, France. We know where the UK, Great Britain is conducting, China, India, Pakistan, and so on. So it's a very interesting map, because as far as we are concerned, and I'm going to open it on my side so I can see a bit better, because it's a bit small for me. Just bear with me 1 second, Patrick, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Okay. Now so what you can see, just for the public here, to stay in line with what we've just been discussing now. As you can see, in Africa, North Africa, you get Reagan, right? So they say 1960, 1961, you get 4 tests there. We know there's a bit more.
And
there's over 13.
What country is that in? Is that in Algeria?
It's Algeria, yeah. It's Algeria, okay. Reagan, and in Eker. Okay, so if you look on your documents on your side, the sites are referred to as, I'll give you the name now, Reagan, Hamoudia, and then the second site is known as in Eker Tahurit Tan Afela. That's both in Algeria. In Eker, they done 13 tests between 1961 and 1966. 1966 is considered the date when Israel actually arrived at really what they wanted to achieve, which is the nuclear warhead. And then from that, they build up their arsenal. But all the tests were conducted to the point that by 1966, we can pretty much say that this is when Israel acquired its really first operative nuclear bomb. And then from that, they just increase the volume. So that's why this map is interesting for, because not everyone is familiar with where these places are. And if you look on the left side of the map, you have, I don't know why it's cut. I can't see it there, but on the left of the map, you got Alamogordo, Colorado, as well as the United States, Nevada. But further below there is in the Pacific, there is two places. One is the Mururoa Lagoon, where they conducted so many tests. And then, of course, Fangatofa, the second islands where the French conducted there. And we have movies, films, we got the balloons, pictures of them. We got so much information because obviously when you conduct this test at that time, some people got hurt and then they got badly hurt. So over the years, a lot of militaries in France, they came together, they founded an association in the year 2000, I think. It's called Aven, and this association is about veterans going after the French government and saying, look, we had no protections because we have films, we can see exactly what they were wearing in this test, and these tests are absolutely unbelievable. They are shocking to watch, and we have good footage of that. And you can see the protections they have. They have none. Some of them, they're launched from barges, with balloons. And you can see these guys with shorts and T-shirts literally participating in a nuclear test, mid-air 600, 900 meters, thinking that they're safe. Well, they were not safe. And these guys over the years have developed really heavy cancers. Many of them died, and a lot of thyroid issues, this association is very important to, at least to give these guys justice, because they advanced the nuclear program for France, but they also advanced the nuclear program for Israel and South Africa during the apartheid era. It's not the case anymore, of course.
Yeah, and that brings us to this character here, Mordecai Vanunu, kidnapped in London, smuggled out of the country, wakes up in Israel, and imprisoned more or less for life, still under house arrest, if I'm not mistaken. So tell us his story.
Yeah, Vanunu, it's an interesting, his name is Mordechai Vanunu. He's actually from Morocco originally. He was born in Morocco, in Marrakesh.
Mizrahi Jewish, yeah.
Yeah, Mizrahi Jewish. So he's born in 1954 in Marrakesh, and he's come from a very religious Jewish family, and so they're going to decide to immigrate in Israel in 1963. And at the time, he's going to join the military. He's going to give 2 years of his life, work for a corps of engineers, where eventually he's going to learn the skills of becoming a nuclear, working on the nuclear power plants. Getting this expertise as far as being able to manage a team at the Dimona production plant. So he's going to be doing it for years, I think for 8 years all in all. And he's going to work at the Macon facility. He's going to end up actually being the, I think, the manager, the team manager for that particular floor. And when people were taking their lunch, when people were kind of going around and resting, he used to go in the 6 different levels within the nuclear power plant and take pictures of the reactors, and really key pictures to demonstrate that this was not just a civilian program, but indeed it was part, especially in the plutonium separation plant, taking pictures, showing, demonstrating for those of us that are aware of it, that understand what they need to see to associate the program to a military nuclear program. And that's exactly what he did. And then as I said earlier, he was someone that was extremely political. He was an activist. He was pro-Palestinian. He was very invested with Lebanon as well. And of course, when I think when they started to invade, and Israel invaded Lebanon, I think it's 1988, if I'm not mistaken. I stand corrected, but that's when he lost it, and then didn't want to be Jewish anymore, become laïc, become Christians, and then next thing he was out, took his money, severance package, and then ended up in Australia, where he met a Colombian independent journalist named Guerrero, and kind of spilled the bean a little bit, perhaps too much. And Guerrero thought it was so hot that he thought that he was too small for it, but he was happy to make the connections with the Sunday Times. And then have Vanunu traveling to the UK to present basically his information, which obviously at the time, can you imagine, it was a bombshell. And Guerrero probably made his money, and then Vanunu ended up basically staying in London, outside on the outskirts of London for quite some time, because he was benefiting from the protections of the UK. And yes, it's a very complex story, but of course, again, pseudonyms inside the media will start to inform other media, as well as the Israeli and certainly the Mossad, that some guys, some nuclear scientists, were spilling the bean on their nuclear reactors and their nuclear military program. So Mossad had to act very quickly, and they didn't want to make a mess in the UK. So the best way for them was to have him move outside of the UK, and that's exactly what they did, using a lady, an agent, a lady, which eventually will basically convince him to go to Italy, where I think a brother was supposed to have an apartment. And then he's obviously attracted to her. He's going to travel to Italy. And then from that on, when he gets there, he's going to be assaulted by the Mossad, drugged, and then put on a boat, extracted back to Israel. That's his story. And then he's going to be sentenced in a tribunal in Jerusalem for 18 years, for releasing state secret. And he was released eventually.
Interesting. And just worth noting, Robert Maxwell was very active around that time. Another Israeli super spy who was owner of major media conglomerate, but also working on behalf of the state of Israel. And that's the father of Ghislaine Maxwell, the head of procurement for Jeffrey Epstein. So just so people can connect the dots there, it's quite a fascinating chain of VIPs, to say the least. So here, this is Vanunu writing this story on his hand, trying to get the message out.
He get arrested. He's in the car. He's arrested, and he's trying to tell the people, he was hijacked from Rome, So he's telling this story. So we don't even need to, this is not it's a bit of a James Bond, but it did happen. It did happen to him. Amazing story.
Yeah, amazing story, Mordecai Vanunu, and so I mean, these are some of the key details as well, and I have one more clip from Numac, Ryan Dawson's film, which we'll play as well. We'll bring this back up on here, and I think this is the last little piece here, which will also illuminate another part of this story. Here we go.
To this day, the official U.S. policy on Israel's well-known nuclear weapons is as silly as the denial of Taiwan's sovereignty. Everyone knows they exist, yet the government pretends it's invisible. Even though Israel made an offer to sell nuclear-tipped Jericho missiles to South Africa, PW both are only pulled out of that deal, by the way, because of the price. Israel is not a signatory to the NPT, Non-Proliferation Treaty, nor will it ever be asked to be. Allowing the apartheid regime to dictate U.S. policy has been toxic. This position of nuclear ambiguity is made all the more asinine by the fact that whistleblowers have photographed their warheads and shown the world. In typical fashion, the whistleblowers go to jail if any of their information involves Israel, and the criminals run free.
Yeah.
I think Ryan Dawson sums it up pretty well, and that's just a little piece of NUMEC, how Israel stole the atomic bomb and killed JFK. Again, I think one of the best films Ryan's made, and probably on this subject the best film, full stop. But we're just showing you a little clip. This is free on Rumble. You also find it at 21st Century Wire this week. Was our Sunday screening. But Freddie, that kind of tells the story there, and we can also go to the website as well. We'll bring up onto the screen from 21st Century Wire the post, the report, which you've also read as well, regarding the NUMEC affair. And it's just important to highlight, Fred, that we're not in the realm of conspiracy theory here. We've got excellent documentation of all of this. This is not it's hidden in plain sight, let's just say, and it's just something that nobody talks about, as Ryan said in that clip. And the whistleblowers like Mordecai Vanunu, or other whistleblowers like Julian Assange for other things, these are the people that end up in prison, and not the actual criminals, not the people that are perpetrating these international crimes. And again, here is this. Here, I'll actually play this. This is an excellent little film clip here from independent journalist Jalissa Dugro talking about Dimona and this secret Israeli nuclear program. Here, we'll play this. It was just be for a minute or so, but this is a very informative piece here. We'll bring this up on screen and enlarge it just a little bit more so we can get a better frame. But here it is.
Many analysts warn that the next nuclear conflict might ignite from the Middle East, and Israel's nuclear program, widely regarded as the world's worst kept secret, is often at the center of these concerns. But why? For years, Israel has crafted a narrative of nuclear ambiguity, refusing to confirm nor deny its existence of its arsenal. Despite American laws barring aid to nuclear states outside of the NPT, U.S. support for Israel has not only persisted, but grown. So if Israel truly possesses nuclear weapons, how did it secure them under a veil of secrecy? Earlier this year, one of Israel's own ministers hinted that the country might resort to using its arsenal in Gaza, only for Netanyahu's office to leap into damage control. This raises the question, how did Israel's covert nuclear program unfold, and what does its existence mean for global security? Israel's nuclear program, often referred to as the world's worst kept secret, was achieved through a calculated web of alliances, covert operations, and outright deception, enabling the state to quietly develop an arsenal while skirting international scrutiny. In 1949, France became one of the first nations to recognize Israel, legitimizing its establishment and establishing a crucial early ally. France was a key supplier of arms, enabling Israel to build its defense capabilities, and rapidly. By 1956, France joined Israel and the UK in an assault on Egypt, hoping to destabilize Arab power in the region. Following this aggression, Israel approached France for nuclear development support, framing its intentions as peaceful while concealing its long-term military ambitions. And at this point, France had not even yet developed nuclear weapons themselves, but Israel's Prime Minister, David Ben-Gurion, had long pursued this capability. With U.S. policy strongly against nuclear proliferation, including Eisenhower's 1953 Atoms for Peace initiative, Israel knew Washington would not support any nuclear weaponization. So, rejected by the U.S., Israel turned to France, where Shimon Peres secured a deal for technical assistance and equipment to build a nuclear reactor in Dimona, capable of 40 megawatts. The agreement specified that France would reclaim radioactive materials after the project's completion to prevent weaponization, but this agreement did not follow as planned. In 1957, construction on Dimona began under strict secrecy. Only France was aware of the project's full nature, and the U.S. was intentionally kept out of the loop. American intelligence had concerns that an Israeli nuclear arsenal could trigger Soviet nuclear support for Egypt. To achieve weaponization, Israel needed a separate plutonium facility. Despite French reluctance to support this, the Israelis managed to secure approval for the plutonium separation plant, which was constructed by Saint-Gobain, the same French company that later helped Pakistan develop its nuclear program. Political shifts in France nearly derailed the Dimona project. In 1958, when Charles de Gaulle came into power, he suspended nuclear collaborations, but some high-ranking French officials ignored his directives. French Energy Minister Jacques Sestel, among others, kept the project moving forward against official orders. And despite pressure from the US to curtail nuclear proliferation, these officials continued backing Israel's progress, driven by both political and ideological motives. When France's Prime Minister, Michel Debré, reinforced the suspension, Israel maneuvered around it by sending Shimon Peres to obtain a forged signature that predated the government collapse. By 1960, as France prepared for its own nuclear tests and sought US support, de Gaulle imposed new conditions on Israel, demanding transparency and international inspection of Dimona. This was unacceptable to Israel, which was committed to maintaining secrecy. Ben-Gurion even attempted to appease de Gaulle, suggesting Israel would only weaponize with French permission, a proposal de Gaulle saw right through. In August of 1960, the US gathered aerial intelligence confirming Dimona's true nature, which nearly led France to cut ties. Israel countered with blackmail, threatening to expose French companies involved in the project to Arab nations. This pressure worked, and France relented, allowing private contractors to finish Dimona without inspection. In December of 1960, aware that the US had proof of Dimona's purpose, Ben-Gurion publicly declared the reactor was strictly for peaceful purposes. The US opted to ignore this, unwilling to jeopardize its growing strategic alliance with Israel. By the early 1960s, Israel had completed the Dimona reactor and gained entry into the nuclear club without formal recognition. By maintaining a policy of nuclear ambiguity, Israel has been able to secure US aid indefinitely, skirting American laws that prohibit aid to nuclear states and benefiting from US support as a covert nuclear power. The secrecy surrounding Israel's nuclear program raises an unsettling possibility: the Samson option, a rumored last resort strategy to unleash devastation should Israel ever feel threatened with annihilation. Israel's track record suggests a readiness to take drastic measures under pressure, and the pursuit of nuclear capabilities has shown that it will go to any length to protect its interests. With the truth of its nuclear arsenal hidden yet palpable, we're left questioning just how close this covert power might bring the region and the world to a nuclear flashpoint.
So Fred, that's it's a bit longer, that video, but I think it's a good summary of a lot of what we talked about, and just kind of putting it in perspective. Again, that's up at 21stcenturywire.com, and that's embedded in this here, the National Security Archive, the NUMEC affair, and Israel's nuclear weapons program, covert nuclear weapons program. And I'll even go further. I'm calling it the nuclear blackmail program, because I believe that Israel, by keeping their policy of nuclear ambiguity, they've been able to blackmail the United States and to blackmail Europe and basically to blackmail all their quote allies. And this is one of the big problems: is there's no transparency. They're outside of international law. They're outside of international norms. They're outside of non-proliferation treaties. They're outside of regulatory bodies. They can do whatever they want, whenever they want, and there's nobody holding them to account. And so this is incentivizing very bad behavior by this rogue state. And I think this is one of the biggest fundamental problems with the region and also the world, and also the U.S. support for the state of Israel. And again, you just have to read this document. You have to read, this is in the National Security Archive in the United States. This is Israel's clandestine program, where they stole enriched uranium from the United States. They ran spy networks inside the U.S., highly illegal, very dangerous, and has effectively, through this program, Freddie, it's given them license to destabilize the Middle East and cause untold death and destruction. What we have seen in the last 18 months is unprecedented in modern times. And it's because of things like this that Israel believes and acts as if it's above the law, that it's above international norms, that it doesn't have to abide by any international law, treaties, conventions, whatever. They're exempt from everything.
Yeah.
And it's just it's such a destabilizing factor. And I think France's role in this is just something beyond criminal, of course. But France has been able to kind of skirt along in the margins of this story. They really escaped any real accountability on this. That, to me, is one of the incredible parts of this scandal, Fred, that you've done so well to give us the details of here. But this is basically, it's the nuclear quid pro quo. France and Israel worked together. France could not have the bomb without Israel. Israel could not have the bomb without France. It was an absolute partnership. Both of them became nuclear powers, one declared, one undeclared, through an absolute intent, intimate partnership. And we'll go for your final summary. I mean, is that the main takeaway, Fred? And just put this finally into historical perspective.
Well, the takeaway for me, Patrick, in this particular case and this presentation is the fact that my country has facilitated the development of an illegal nuclear power facilities, which clearly, as we demonstrated today, has the capacity to project nuclear deterrence capabilities and owns quite a substantial amount of nuclear warheads. And in the current climates, despite the fact that you're Israeli or you're Palestinian, my message is very clear. It doesn't matter if you're Israeli or Palestinian, because if that thing goes off there, it does not make any difference, because nuclear radioactivities and all the fallout of an explosions, it's not going to be looking at whether you have an Israeli passport or a Palestinian one. They don't care. Israel will be, and Palestine will be, absolutely a scorched earth for a very long period of time. So the reason why we do these presentations late at night, I mean, at least for me in France, and what we're trying to raise this topic is simply for people to really awaken to the risk of these operations, and how much, despite all the time that has been spent, 17 years is a long time, and yet we are still inherited of this program. And today, Israel does not have the decency to explain to the rest of the world what they've done, why they did it, and how can we do to remove that, to remove this capabilities. You cannot ask Iran to stop basically moving into a clandestine nuclear military operation, and in yourself for more than 40 years have been operating in complete secrecies and accepting money from the United States government, where it's forbidden by law in the US to send money to, for instance, that has military and nuclear capabilities. So it's a complete, it's for me, it's just the whole thing is unacceptable. You cannot have it both ways. And unfortunately, Israel has been getting away with it, and nobody at the UN Security Council is addressing these issues. It's like almost they're waiting for something to go really wrong. And they'll say, well, Israel has always denied it, so we were not sure. Well, today, I think, and many other people like Ryan and many other good journalists out there have exposed this scandalous operation. And there is no more reason or excuse to say, I didn't know, because if some guys like me in a small village in south of France can find out, I can only imagine what the United Nations and his apparatus and his partners can find out, same as NATO and so on. So there's no excuse for not knowing, all right? The only things now we're trying to establish, as I said, is whether there was a connection between the Dimona nuclear program, Israeli nuclear program, and the assassination of JFK. Everybody have his own idea. My view on it is that 100% JFK. It was not only because of Dimona, but certainly Dimona played an important role in the decisions to take it out. And when you understand the network like Ryan Dobson has demonstrated, it's almost impossible to ignore it. Right? And that's my view on it. And I think the world will be a far more different place if someone like JFK would have been alive and put the United States in the right track. After the Kennedys, this country has gone from bad to worse. It's not the America that I knew when I was young, and I feel so sorry for the American, because country has lost its way, and you've lost your country because you have foreign powers interfering within the inside. And when you serve the United States in the military or in any capacities, you swear to uphold the constitutions and to defend the countries against the enemy from outside and inside your country. And same goes for my guys and my people in France. That's our oath. And unless we're going to clean up, well, we're going to have the same mess we have had for the past 30 years. Thank you for having me, Patrick.
Yeah, no, thank you, Freddie. I appreciate it. And again, this is a very deep topic, and we've given a we've given a cursory summary. I think a very good timeline of identifying the key people, the key dates, and putting that story together, and those key takeaways. And like I said, when we were reviewing the notes, Fred, before the show, I had no idea that I had no idea how France got its nuclear weapons, because the UN Security Council is comprised of it's the nuclear club, which France has a seat on, with veto power and everything that goes along with the Russians, the Chinese, the Americans, and the British. How did they get it? And I didn't know the story. And this really changes a lot when you think about it. So France has played, quite a blinder here with Israel to get a seat on that. So they owe Israel, don't they? The country, you could say the Israeli mafia owns France, and this is one of the key pillars of that coercion, if you will, the hook into France. It's with this nuclear program, undoubtedly, Freddie.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, you're going to be in France. We are censored. You cannot, pronounce the word Jewish or, without someone coming and knocking at your door. Really, so it's become really bad, and they've been extremely good at controlling the mainstream media, the narrative, and more importantly, controlling the entire European operations. It goes far beyond France. This web, this network of people that works, for the interest of another nation than theirs is just simply unacceptable. And unless we're going to really accept the fact that this is happening, and we need to put a system in place which are going to forbid people with dual nationality to have executive powers in our countries, or at least a large amount of powers in our countries and in the European supranational organizations, whether it's NATO or whether it's the European Commissions. We need to get rid of those that have a double agenda, period. I'm not for EU, I'm not for NATO. I think these organizations are criminal in nature. They're just there whether to steal people or to conquest or to expand the interest of a foreign nation in Europe. I have no interest of that. I'm not interested in serving the United States interest in Europe, nor the Israeli interest in Europe. It's not what I'm a citizen for. I'm here to take care of my family, take care and learn as much as I can about my cultures and other cultures around the world. And history help in that process of learning. And that's the reason why I went back today to the 1950s and say, hey, why don't we talk about that? Because if we want to understand what's going to happen or what it's about to happen, the hell that is about to be unleashed in the Middle East, we need at least to get the truth and the bottom line and understand who played what, who did what, and how much, we are responsible for keeping this silence. And that silence there's no price for this silence. We must not be silent. We need to speak up. And that's why I'm here today with you to speak up and say, how much lies are we going to take? And that's, for me, it's just, I'm done with it. I'm pretty much done. Doesn't matter. I don't care. I will never be a mainstream journalist, and I'm not interested in being one. I'm happy to be independent, and I'm happy to be one finger in the hand that's going to fight against these lies and fight against anything that just simply does not help us. There's nothing in us. There's nothing in there for the United States in bombing the Houthis. There's nothing in there to go after Iran. Nothing at all. Zero. So I hope I play my part in denouncing this scandalous nuclear operation in Israel.
Yeah, and it's just so important And you sum that up beautifully, Freddie. But it's so important that people understand that the whole basis of the current U.S. aggressive position and Israeli aggressive position, bombing Yemen just this past week, and then of threatening to attack Iran because of Iran's nuclear weapons program, which the U.S. has no evidence that there is a nuclear weapons program. It's the Iraq WMD canard all over again. That's what we're stuck with. And so there's no evidence of a nuclear weapons program, no WMDs, yet we're threatening to attack, probably not invade, but attack with Israel, or allow Israel to attack Iran, and then the U.S. is backing them up, basically. They've already hit Yemen, and they're blaming everything Yemen does on Iran. And the reason Iran is evil is because Iran allegedly has nuclear weapons, which nobody has any evidence of. I mean, this whole thing is such a joke, Freddie. And so meanwhile, Israel, the belligerent in this story, has a nuclear weapons program, which is totally undeclared and not allowed to be inspected, totally unaccountable. And so they're allowed to threaten and blackmail everybody, Europe, the United States, the Middle East, everybody. The only countries they really can't blackmail too much are maybe Russia, perhaps China, but certainly they have an unbelievable leverage. And so what they're demanding of Iran, they can't even do themselves. And what they're accusing Iran of, they themselves are guilty of. It's just the level of deception here is so much, and that's why this story is so important, because this story is just so emblematic of the hypocrisy, so emblematic of the treachery of the French government. First of all, the Americans, with full knowledge of this, no doubt, and after the fact, not doing anything about it, even though it's against their national interest, even though Robert F. Kennedy was against it, and he paid the ultimate price. And you know, whatever your opinion is on who killed Kennedy, I think the case made in this film, plus what's in the JFK files, the multiple references to Israeli intelligence, Freddie, I think that a strong circumstantial case can be made for a big issue in a country that itself has an extended organized crime network that works with other organized crime networks that were active with the JFK assassination. That's well documented in the fact that you are dealing with basically a gangster state, effectively.
It's a rogue state, and on the other side, it's not even better. When it's in France and the United States, it's not better, because we're allowing basically these countries to go unpunished, unchecked, if you will, keep on sending money, on funding these countries just for an agenda that is more ideological, that is more geostrategic for the survival of the United States of the West. Because if you lose this kind of route, you know, it's what Benjamin Netanyahu said after the big conference in India, you know, how important the IMEC was, you know, this Indian Middle East corridor, in Europe corridor. So it's so important to them that there is a sphere of influence that is projected by the US and Israel in these particular areas. And they're hoping, all right, this is the strategy of hope, where we hope that Iran's going to back down, where we hope that Egypt's going to remain calm and Jordan's going to be okay. So there's a lot of hope, you know, but at the end of the day, the only hope that I see here is that we're going to see more weapons sold by the U.S. military-industrial complex in exchange for the silence on the Dimona nuclear power plant. Right, because that's the only reason why nobody's talking. Because the day it comes at the Congress and they say, "Oh, sorry, we can't sell any more weapons to you," well, then you get a big buyer here, and you're projecting force in the sphere and influence of that is not naturally a sphere of influence of the United States. If you tell me that the United States has influence in Canada and influence in Mexico, I'll tell you, okay, that's around the corner. I can understand that. But in the Middle East, in the West Asia, what sphere of influence is that? Why are you projecting force in an area that is not your areas, where you have only 3% of your logistic traffics, your trade, 3%?
Yeah.
What is the justification to bomb the Houthis? You don't bloody know who the Houthis are. You don't know them. You've never met one in your life, and you'll probably die not even meeting one, you know. So that's what we're getting from this bunch of clowns at the White House, this new National Security Council with Watts and all that. These guys are just, it's like, it's amateur time. It's really amateur time. These people have no idea what they're talking about. It's just basically serving an ideology, and that is the only one that's going to keep your job at the White House or in this administration, and that is the number one policy: Israeli first. All right, that's it. Doesn't matter. It doesn't have to make sense. Treat the American, treat the rest of the world ignorance like ignorance. We don't know what's going on, but we do. There's a lot of people now that follow the news that's trying to understand for themselves. We're away from the mainstream media. How long this vaudeville is going to last? I don't think it's going to last long. I think the US is up for some big surprise. Everybody's talking about Egypt. It's going to blow up. Jordan's going to blow up because people cannot wait to go and kill Jews. That's the real war that's going to start, and it's already started, I think, is in the West. You know, people are starting to awaken. It's the war on the psyche. It's the war on the mental, because when people awaken, there is no way to stop that. And you won't be able to stop, because this lie, it's not sustainable any longer. And I feel sorry.
Just to clarify what you just said, it's the idea that Arabs just want to wipe out Jews in Israel. That's just a trope that just continually gets recycled. Yeah. When in fact, the Arab population in the Middle East have only wanted one thing from the beginning, which was they want their land for their people, especially Palestine. But they don't want to be held to ransom by a rogue settler state with nuclear weapons right in the center of and that's been their grievance. That's their issue. And so again, but it's all shrouded in tropes, as you just said. And that's one of many lies that have been stacked up to keep this whole thing going, which is, you know, I think one of it does risk bringing us to a major confrontation that could be the beginnings of another phase of World War III, could be a nuclear exchange between nuclear powers. We don't know. We don't know how it's going to end. What we do know is this is really playing with fire, and by saying force is going to be the ruling paradigm rather than diplomacy, which is where the White House is at the moment, it seems, and where Israel certainly is. Oh, by the way, Israel first, Europe last. Europe last, because guess who pays? Because the Houthis weren't hitting any ships while there was a ceasefire and while there was aid and food and water going into Gaza. But Israel broke the ceasefire agreement. Israel blockaded Gaza again. And then Yemen said they're going to respond. Yeah. So who suffers there? Europe suffers. So by the U.S. antagonizing Yemen, by bombing them and causing them to interdict shipping in the Red Sea, that's only hurting the European economy, right? Yes, and the Nord Stream pipeline sabotage only hurts the European economy. So the actions of the United States of America are designed to hurt the European economy, not the American economy. And that's the main takeaway that people need to get their heads around, Freddie, because I see a lot of people missing the obvious on this.
They are absolutely rubbing us blind. And this is what it's all. This is the nature of this transatlantic relationship that has been going on. That is at the very heart and foundation of Europe that is killing us. And it's killing us because it's not in our best interest. And we tend to go along with this U.S. policy, which seems to be dictating what's good for us and what's not. That's why I'm a sovereignist. I'm not a Gaullist per se, but I'm a sovereignist. And a sovereignist means that, if I make a mistake, I'll that's fine. I can live with that. I'll take it on myself. But I don't have to suffer from other people bad ideas and other people bad foreign policies and so on. I don't have to, as I say, to disengage from foreign policies or from, the banking environment, the financial environment, or the economic environment in which I want to live in. I don't have to surrender that kind of power to a supranational, unelected body, to someone like van der Leyen, which has made a career out of corruptions. Why do I have to do that? I didn't elect these people. They have nothing to do with me. I have no problem with German. Don't send women like this to us. We don't need them. We don't want them. We've expressed ourselves through referendum, made it very clear that we didn't want to be part of that bad idea that was Europe. And it has proven right. It was a bad idea. We broke. And we have now these supranational organizations going after the savings of French, telling them it's a great opportunity to invest in the defense, to support Ukraine, to help Ukraine survive. Survive what? Survive the coup in 2014? Because can we not talk anymore about the truth? Can historical facts cannot be any more part of the mainstream media? And, can we not just simply tell the people this is a scam? This is a huge scam. But as soon as you say that, is whether you're anti-Semitist or whether you are a conspirationist.
Or you're a Russian. You're a Russian.
You're Russian and a stooge or whatever. I've had all the time, but I've never come people actually coming with an argument and saying it's not true, and that is the reason why you're mistaken. Put the documents, put things on the table and tell me that I'm not right, because I have documents and I will put it in front of you, and then we can balance it up and let people judge. Let people actually decide who tells the truth and who's out there gaslighting the population. I have no interest. I'm getting old, I don't care. My life, I've done it. I've enjoyed some great times in our periods in the 20th century where people were peaceful. We had great time. We had great music. We had great spirit in the world. There was hope plenty everywhere. You can find a job. You can make a living, raise your family. There was some kind of stabilities in the world. There's always problem, don't get me wrong, Patrick, but at least we were not living in fear. I just don't remember closing that door when I was growing up. My doors were open. My friends were coming. I was leaving for a day or two. My door would be open. My neighbors would watch for me, no problem. What's going on? We're living in fear in our box, trying to make a kopeck, and what is that all about? We're getting poorer. We're getting less powers. And we got this elite getting richer and richer and selling us their bad idea with our money.
Selling us pharmaceuticals, selling us pharmaceuticals and really bad media. That's what they're selling at the moment, and lies upon lies, which we're here to debunk, and we're here to basically set straight. So again, Freddie Ponton, thank you very much. We went a little bit over time, as we knew we would, but some of these things need to be said, and I'm glad that you're saying it, and others will say the same and more so. So we need the chorus to be bigger, and thank you for this. Obviously, there's more work to be done on this subject, and we're going to be doing it. We published quite a bit already on this, and again, putting the National Security Archive data up at 21stcenturywire.com is a very important reference for people, absolutely factual. And also the work that Freddie's doing as well on this, and the Nord Stream pipeline story especially is invaluable for the community out there that want to get to the bottom of these very difficult stories. So thank you very much, Freddie, and we'll see you very soon, hopefully, on our next broadcast.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you for having me, Patrick. Have a good night.
Yep, there he goes, ladies and gentlemen. And you can, again, follow Freddie at Freddie_Ponton on X. And you'll see his work there and see what he's looking at, what he's pointing to, what he's saying is important. So that's all we've got time for. This has been an extended midweek wire, but as you can see, a lot of work goes into this type of programming, and we couldn't do it without your support. So again, if you find it within your generosity to support us, we just had a winter fundraising drive. Didn't do as well as we would like to, but the year is still young. So if you like the sort of work we're doing, please consider donating. There's lots of different options, from PayPal, credit card, crypto. There's a lot of different ways, or better, subscribe and be a monthly member at 21wire.tv. That's the best thing you can do to support us going forward. Very inexpensive, but you get a lot of bang for your buck. We've been able to roll out this program, and it's been going strong. I think we're near our 10th episode, so we're really excited about that. And this is something new for the new year, along with the Sunday Wire, which is our long-running podcast, radio show, and now television program every Sunday, our weekly omnibus news and analysis program and podcast live every Sunday there at actually slight change on the time. Last week, we're back to daylight savings harmonization, 5 till 8 UK, 12 till 3 Eastern Standard Time. That's every Sunday, ladies and gentlemen. So you can catch us there at the Sunday Wire, hosted by myself, but also fantastic team, Hesher and Ruckus, our colleagues at Alternate Current Radio Network. They're also sometimes hosting as well as being our guests. And Basil Valentine, our roving correspondent for culture and sport, now the political editor at TNT, now the Pulse.today. So yeah, formerly TNT. So Basil also joined us this past week for a great analysis on a number of things, including the JFK assassination, Israel's nuclear weapons clandestine program, which we talked about as well. That's on last week's edition. Great discussion with Ryan Dawson about the RFK, Robert F. Kennedy assassination. And we had Ryan on last week on the Midweek Wire here talking about the JFK assassination. So back-to-back great programs. Ryan is amazing. And again, his film, which we've been promoting because it's so excellent, Numek, How Israel Stole the Bomb from the U.S. and Killed John F. Kennedy. The details in this documentary are groundbreaking and explosive, no pun intended. So you want to get your hands on that. Free on Rumble. It's up at 21stcenturywire.com as well. That's all we've got time for. Ladies and gentlemen, again, I'm Patrick Henningsen, your host. This is the Midweek Wire. Freddie Ponton, our guest this week, talking about the unholy partnership between France and Israel and the clandestine nuclear weapons program that neither country would be able to pull off without the other. What an incredible story. And again, we brought you all the details of that this week. Great journalism and research as usual by Freddie, and we really appreciate everything that he does. And he's one of our top journalists and researchers now, not only at 21st Century Wire, but really in the independent media. Freddie's doing fantastic work, and we really, really appreciate it. That's all we've got time for this week, folks. Again, thank you to everybody on X, Facebook Live, Rumble, YouTube, BitChute, as well as those of you watching us on 21stcenturywire.com. This will be on the audio streams on iTunes. If you subscribe to us on Spotify and iTunes, this will be here later on, so you can catch us there. But until then, we'll see you on Sunday for the Sunday Wire. Take care. Hope you have a great week, everybody. All the best.
genocide, some think it's biblical fate. Ceasefire now. Ceasefire now. Ceasefire now. It guides us somehow. This might be the last time to raise a hand about who we are. What's this say about who we are? 'Cause this might be the last time to raise a hand about who we are. What's this say about who we are? Digital images and digital lies cut out their heart along with their supply. The propaganda leads to dehumanize.